surround the house. They burst in the door. They run up the stairs. They go into his room. They're searching. They're searching the bathroom. They're searching. They finally come downstairs, and this motherfucker was on the ground, passed out right in front of them. They just ran right by him on the floor.
Seemed like a lot of work preparing this SWAT team.
Yeah.
My favorite, actually, the part that I thought, that part is funny, but the part I thought was funny was one of the SWAT guys comes into one of the rooms and the dog's in there, and he puts the gun on him and goes, "I got the dog!"
Yeah.
And he sounded so proud. I was like, that must be the best day of that little SWAT man's life. Like,
I thought about that,
he's
but
like,
then...
I got the dog! Hello and welcome to Judgmental Horror Junkies. Ba-da-ba-bum-bum-ba-dum-bum-bum.
We are back.
We're back, baby. It's the end of the month, and you know that what that means. Another foray into the realm of horror and fantasy and sci-fi and J-Lo's badunkadunk.
Yeah, this one's a little sexy. This is sexual horror.
I mean, it's J-Lo. Even if she didn't want it to be, it would be. She's a lovely woman.
I do believe this one was her first foray into acting, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, that foray being The Cell, which is what we're covering today. I am one of your hosts, Reno Dino Valentino, head doctor at the Asylum for the Insane, and with me, as always, my lovely co-host, Goreship, the ship that sails the river Styx.
Hello, and thank you for the introduction,
and
as always.
And the man who has brought us this lovely sci-fi horror venture. We did 2 sci-fi horrors in a row.
Yeah, it was perfect timing.
Yeah.
It was perfect timing. It was the anniversary of this movie.
We make this the month of the summer of sci-fi. We'll call it.
The 23rd.
We can do it again next year. We can make it a tradition.
Whatever we wind up doing, I'm totally cool with it because there's so many sci-fi horror movies out there that deserve more love that have either gone under the radar or they're quote-unquote cult classics.
Yes, I would. Yeah, I would also like to take a spin around some of the biggies like Alien and Solaris and so on and so forth. I may have to take this. I don't know if you all can.
Too much fun clicking.
I don't know if y'all can hear this, but I have a bubbly water because I'm that guy, and when you push the top down, it makes a little clicky noise, and
you're having too much fun with a little bit of the bubbly.
And it is like one of those little clickers that they give children who are fidgety.
A fidget clicker.
Yeah, I don't need this. I apologize in advance for every click you're going to hear. I'm going to try and limit them, I promise.
I hope so, because you may then hear me flipping this table over on the
Yeah, you'll hear one final click before the end of this podcast. It'll be Goreship turning the tables on his opponent.
Well, before we jump into discussing The Cell today, I would like to take a moment just to say, welcome back to America, Mr. Reno.
It is great. This is kind of a bit of serendipity because we both have sort of wrestling announcements to make. I watched the G1 semifinals and the Tokyo Sumo Dome in Tokyo, Japan. And that was... God damn it. You clicking motherfucker. I'm going to put this back in the fridge and get a water just for safety. And our lovely Goreship had his wrestling debut. And so it's been a big August for everybody.
Yeah, it was awesome. I was jealous. You got to go to Japan and watch one of my favorite companies in the wrestling business
Put
today.
it on like only New Japan can.
You got to watch one of the most historical matches that they've had in recent years. Jealous of that. Watching Will Ospreay versus Tetsuya Naito in the G1 Climax semifinals. And then, as Reno pointed out, I have started a wrestling journey over this last year, and I made a debut in a Battle Royal Blitz this past weekend. When this podcast drops, it'll have been a week since I've debuted.
Very excited.
But I had a lot of fun. A little banged up still, but I was really excited, nervous, scared shitless, but also, more than anything, just... really kind of in a holy shit, this is a surreal moment.
I admire you for checking another thing off your bucket list. I'm
not getting any younger, and I got so many things that I didn't accomplish in my 20s because I was too young, dumb, and full of cum, playing music and trying to do other stuff that I didn't truly fulfilled with. And when you're a kid growing up, especially in the early 90s, late 90s,
the
attitude era. You know, your first childhood dream, if you're one of those kids born during that time period, should have been to be, I want to be the next Rock or Stone Cold.
While you were sitting
go around like DX and say, suck it to everybody.
While you're sitting in detention, because you told your teacher to smell what you were cooking or to suck it or whatever, catchphrase got stuck in your brain and you blurted out in math class. You think to yourself, if I was a professional wrestler, I wouldn't have to worry about these
things. I could just stone cold stun my teacher and walk out the building with both my middle fingers in the air.
Yes, and people would applaud me. It would be those stupid, and then everyone applauded moments.
If you like what I just did, give me a hell yeah.
If you also don't like Algebra 2, give me a hell yeah.
Yeah. But so it's kind of crazy surreal. That I got to have my first foray into a wrestling ring in front of a crowd and really get to kind of get that first little rub of exposure to seeing what this wrestling journey is going to be like. And I'll tell you what, as sore as it can be, I had a hell of a time.
Excellent.
And another reason why it was so kind of surreal is because this past week, the wrestling world had a very rough week.
We lost two of our legends.
We lost the legendary hardcore legend, Terry Funk, at the age of 79.
R.I.P. Funkster.
A man who influenced a lot of the hardcore wrestling genre that I grew up loving and watching.
And also, and I don't think he gets enough credit for this, a man who greatly influenced promos as well. I would say as much as Jake the Snake Roberts.
Oh yeah, their voices and their cadences are definitely things
have been copied so many times by so many wrestlers, especially if you're doing a cowboy gimmick.
And then the biggest one, the one that hurt me the most and still is really sore, we lost Wyndham Rotunda, also known as Bray Wyatt, at the young, ripe age of only 36, and it's a shame. That man impacted so many people, and I'll tell you what, if it wasn't for discovering Bray Wyatt and getting back into wrestling, thanks to Reno, and him being on that list of people I should check out, thanks to Reno, I don't know if I would have developed that connection to want to get back into wrestling. Wyndham Rotunda, Bray Wyatt, whatever you know him by, if you are a wrestling fan and you listen to this.
The Fiend.
He meant so much to so many people, and to me, he will always be the reason why I decided to finally commit to joining wrestling and traveling down the road and taking the journey and exploring what a wrestling character could do and could be, because this man was a creative genius, a storyteller.
Never scared to experiment, and it's a shame that we are not going to see what other things he would have done, because
he was on the verge of a return once again.
Yeah, the Uncle Howdy thing, it was hit and miss, but the one thing you can always could have always counted on Bray Wyatt to do was reinvent himself, and he was coming back as a reinvented, we don't know what as, but I would have liked to have seen what he would have... Like, Goreship said, the sadder of the two. And I don't think that's contribution related. I think that's because Terry Funk had retired. He was living in an assisted living
career.
Longer than just about it. That man
50 years he had a career.
It was 40 and crazy, 50 and crazy, 60 and crazy. He just kept going. So... he was already in assisted living. He already had a lot of health problems. As sad as his passing was, it was one of those things that you knew was waiting in the wings.
Yeah, unfortunately.
I'm very happy Mick Foley got to see him like a month or two before he passed. But, yeah, like we were saying, Bray Wyatt, as I will always know him, head of the Wyatt household, had a lot more in the tank as the wrestling vernacular goes, and it's a shame that the story ended before we got to see the one, I will say, two silver linings, or one that we've gotten so many tributes from wrestlers, wrestling shows, people showing what he meant, showing old clips that remind you of like, oh my god, this guy was amazing, I forgot he even did that, blah 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 blah. And also he is survived by, you may know him as Bo Dallas, but his younger brother, who will in a way, the best he can, will carry on that legacy of the Rotunda family. I don't use this often, but thoughts and prayers to the Rotunda family, to IRS and the rest of them, and Bray Wyatt, who had 5, 6 children.
He had 2 daughters, 1 son that was only, I believe, 2 years old, and then they just had another son that was recently born.
So four
so
children.
he had 4 kids and a wife, JoJo Offerman, that he left behind way too soon. And I don't want to discuss the details. I just want to remember the man who meant so much to me and so much to Reno. I know some of you are probably listening to this thinking, this is, wrestling, what the hell does this have to do with a horror thing? But the thing is, I want
Bray Wyatt's got something to do with horror.
Yes. This connects, because The Cell very much had aspects that reminded me so much of Bray Wyatt that it was kind of jarring at times, where the way that this man was able to bring you into another world within a world of the wrestling universe and tell you this story and make you suspend that disbelief that he was this crazy, enigmatic cult leader.
It's hard to be a horror wrestling person.
And he transcended
so
horror.
Few people pull it off. What do you have? You have Undertaker, Kane, Mick Foley, Bray Wyatt. As far as WWE goes.
Yeah, that's really all you can.
Yeah. What are you going to put Papa Shango in there? I'm sorry.
No.
I love The Godfather, but come on.
Yeah, that wasn't horror. That was kind of like a fun gimmick.
Yes, that was an 80s gimmick.
And it's crazy to see, along with these tributes, that yes, Bray Wyatt meant a lot to the horror genre, horror world, because people like Bloody Disgusting and comic book culture and, even TMZ and stuff, they acknowledge that he did have a big hand in being in love with the horror genre himself. Yeah. He made a horror movie we may never get to see now.
A lot of people that got into horror did it through the wrestling world. A lot of people watched Undertaker in the ring and were like, oh, that's creepy, I like that, and then went on to pursue horror comics, horror movies, horror. That was some people's gateway drug, was casket matches between Mankind and Undertaker, or watching the Wyatt family come out with their lantern.
Yeah, and for me, it was watching Bray Wyatt. I did watch the Wyatt family later, and I love that very much. Mm-hmm. But for me, the step that I found myself super attracted to was this almost creepypasta-like character he made with the Firefly Funhouse Bray Wyatt, where he was a Mr. Rogers psycho, the Fiend killer. And he had this demonic entity possessing him known as the Fiend Bray Wyatt. And I love the look, I love the promos, I love the vignettes. Those first 10 vignettes he did before he debuted, I watched those, and I just think about how creative of a mind he had, how amazing that story sequence could have been.
They worked on so many levels.
And he had Tom Savini, one of those legendary horror, special effects, makeup artists, and actors and producers, be a part of making those Fireflies Funhouse vignettes come to life. That's how people like Bloody Disgusting, a horror movie hub that gives you all the hottest news on horror movies and paranormal stuff and all that, basically would post about Bray Wyatt constantly because of his association with the horror genre, like Tom Savini. Yeah. And you know what? If you go back and you watch any of the Firefly Funhouse, the Wyatt family, there is this creepy, disturbing factor to it. And there's parts of the way that he thought, that Bray Wyatt thought, that he displayed in his vignettes and his promos, that I saw represented in The Cell. Mm-hmm. So you can see stuff in movies that Bray definitely probably found inspiration from. And it's so hard and jarring for me to look at stuff and be like, oh, I can see bits of Bray in this movie or in this dialogue or whatever. And so
there'll be a lot of that, when we talked about Dark City last month and the influences there. The Cell was such a visually striking movie that you can see where people like Bray Wyatt, future horror movie creators, took inspiration from it, if only on a visual level, because it was just I was worried because of the fact of when this movie came out that the special effects wouldn't hold up, and they did. And so it doesn't surprise me that someone like Bray, whose mind was a sponge for that kind of eerie, macabre stuff, would yank from something like The Cell and stuff that he watched when he was younger and pull it into this character that so many people, mutual characters that so many people came to love and identify with, to the point that he was a heel turned face turned heel. Loved him or hate him, everyone's eyes were... When he came out, he was the center of the world. Yep. I could argue he had the whole thing in his hands.
Thank you for that. I thank you for that. I love that.
Yeah.
But without further ado,
yes,
all
we
wrestling talk
could
aside,
talk. We could spend another hour just talking about
the man,
Funk
the myth,
and Brain,
the legend.
but yeah, we got The Cell to discuss.
And I just wanted to get that preface out of the way because if I do reference Mr. Wyatt again throughout this movie, you'll know why.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot that carries over from both worlds, and I
it's
definitely see
it's still fresh.
this
on our
movie.
minds.
This movie definitely the way that the dream nightmare sequences work very much adds to that creepy ambiance and remembering Mr. Wyatt.
Sure.
So we are discussing the 2000s underrated critical hit box office bomb? Yeah, it was a box office bomb.
Was it?
But it is a hidden gem these days amongst horror fans called The Cell, starring Jennifer Lopez as, I believe this was her first foray into actual acting.
Vince Vaughn?
Yeah, Vince Vaughn
in a serious role? Head scratcher?
Yeah, FBI agent nonetheless.
He never quite got there for me. I will go ahead and say, love this movie. It held up, especially the effects. Mostly it's just a visual, tour de force masterpiece. Yeah. But I never got there with Vince Vaughn. It's ironic because my memories... I know you're going to ask me why I remember this film. I'm going to jump the gun on that. I remember J-Lo's acting not being good, but when I watched it again, I was like, J-Lo wasn't bad.
Yeah, it wasn't
Vince
terrible.
Vaughn was bad.
That's the crazy part about that. I remember being critically panned for J-Lo's acting, and that was the most I remember people really taking away from the movie. I remember as a kid, because I was only 9 years old at this point, finally getting into horror movies, really finding my niche of what horror movies I did like and didn't like. And this one was one of the main ones that my parents rented from Blockbuster for the weekend, and we checked it out together, and I was like, oh, this is weird. It's fucking creepy at parts, but it's also very, it sucks you in. So, while this movie is very much psychological horror, there's also kind of a true crime aspect to it, if you really think about it.
Oh, yeah, there's definitely...
Very much a true crime.
It's almost that... If you didn't have the sci-fi aspect of going into people's minds, it would very much be a Silence of the Lamb kind of horror movie.
Very much.
But you do have that, which takes it to a whole different place. It's a whole different genre of movie. But the parts with the killer are very Silence of the Lamb, in which you have a serial killer who is so distinct and memorable. And who plays that killer?
Speaking of our serial killer,
it's called segues. It's how the professionals do it.
The infamous Vincent D'Onofrio, who plays the serial killer Carl Starger.
Kingpin from Daredevil.
So far we have Jennifer Lopez as Catherine Dean, Vincent D'Onofrio as Carl Starger, the serial killer, Vince Vaughn as FBI agent Peter Novak.
I love the last name.
We also have a couple of other hidden gem stars in here that kind of flew under the radar. We have Dylan Baker, who played Henry West. Now, Dylan Baker is one of those guys where you'll recognize his face from a bunch of stuff but not remember his name.
Now, he's her boss, the guy in the glasses?
Yes, he is the man in the glasses that operates the neuro machine.
Yeah.
Then you have Jake Weber, who is the second FBI agent with Mr. Vince Vaughn's character, Novak.
Yeah.
Jake Weber goes by the name Gordon Ramsay in this movie.
Yeah.
Which I found very funny.
Before there was a Gordon Ramsay of fame.
And I only knew Jake Weber previously from starring in the Marvel movies, as he was the bad guy from the Hulk film.
Okay.
With Edward Norton.
Oh, the Abomination.
Yeah, he turned into the Abomination.
Shows up again in She-Hulk.
Yeah. So
I loved him in She-Hulk. I won't lie.
And then my favorite one of all these little side guest characters was Dean Norris from fucking Breaking Bad, who played... His only name in the movie was Cole. You didn't get a first name, you just got Cole. That's all his name was.
Playing the same role, though, as he did in Breaking Bad.
Essentially. But, so The Cell...
We also had the grumpier old man as one of the detectives. He was the old guy with the mustache.
I did not write his name.
Yeah, I didn't get his name either. And also the lady,
Marion.
The J-Lo's co-worker.
Yeah, Marion.
I know her from a bunch of stuff, but I didn't IMDb her. But she's another one who, once you see her, you'll be like, oh yeah, she's been in 8,000 other movies.
Yeah. It's one of those things where there's very familiar faces in this movie, but you won't really remember the actor's name. But
familiar faces, not familiar names.
Yeah. So The Cell was released in 2000. It was directed by Tarsum Singh. Hopefully I pronounced that right.
Yeah.
And it was written by Mark Prodosevich.
Yeah.
I believe I said that correct.
I think you did. I'll tell you the same thing I tell Cecilia when we read Japanese stuff. Just say it. Don't say I don't know if I got it right. Because you're going to get corrected in the comments, even if you did say it right. So don't even worry about it. Just pronounce it and pretend it was right.
So, the synopsis of this...
One quick other byline we need. Music by Howard Shore, who did the Lord of the Rings music.
Oh, I overlooked that.
Yeah.
Good
Symphonic master, that man. This was one of his earlier works.
I was going to talk about the Foley work that they did for a lot of these dream sequences, because holy crap. But,
well, as far as the orchestral musical score, is that was a Howard Shore joint. But yeah,
very nice.
As you were.
So the plot synopsis for this, pulled from IMDb, is an FBI agent persuades a social worker who is adept with a new experimental technology to enter the mind of a comatose serial killer in order to learn where he has hidden his latest kidnapped victim. Pretty short and sweet and to the point.
Yeah.
That's literally what the whole movie is about. But the craziest part about this for me is I didn't realize the good shit of the movie doesn't start till literally halfway. Like, the movie doesn't start actually, like, getting into the crazy parts until about almost 48 minutes in.
Well, they give you the teaser opener, the Lawrence of Arabia opening thing with J-Lo and the young boy. But then, after that, you've got a big gap before you get to do more fun.
There's a lot of true crime in there before it gets into the horror side of it.
Yeah,
and we already discussed what our initial thoughts on this movie when it came out were. I still stand by J-Lo wasn't the worst part of this movie.
No, I was very impressed with her acting, especially considering it was her first role, and that I went into it thinking it was going to be really bad because that's how I remembered it. But now watching it again, I'm like, oh no, she was fine. Compared to Vince Vaughn, she was good.
See, and remember, like, this is still fresh off of The Matrix and stuff. Like, the year that The Matrix came out, a lot of sci-fi movies suffered because they were being compared to it.
Yeah.
For good or worse.
And that might be what happened to the cell.
Whether it's good or bad, they were compared to it, and it kind of took some of the thunder away from them. But, I do remember this movie being... especially in the dream sequence parts, making my dreams, kind of feel very weird at night, like, in these weird, almost gothic style vibes. It changed the way that I saw dreams because of the way that they showed them in this movie. Yeah,
this did a very good job of creating the kind of randomness that happens in dreams, like because a dream is kind of it's co-directed by your subconscious and your conscious, right, while you're asleep. By the front and back parts of your brain. And this did a very good way of some things you don't really control. It's just the environment that your mind's decided to put you in. And then there's some things that you do manipulate. Like if I had a hard time at work, when I get to sleep that night, I might dream of work. Or I might just be at work, but chasing a silk scarf wearing ninja through a tunnel. And so I think it did a good job of marrying the different types of mental gymnastics that you do while you're asleep, or in the case of this young man in a coma.
And with that being said, we get this crazy opening scene with I didn't know exactly how to describe the sound of the music, but it has a very Indian Arabic music.
I called it the Lawrence of Arabia opening.
Yeah, very, very Indian.
She's in flowing robes on the horse. You've got the desert and nothing else for a long time.
She's just riding this pitch black horse through the desert in a beautiful white,
striking, I think is a good word. It's a very striking look.
And it's crazy, so...
I said, you can't ride the horse closer? And what I meant by that was I was like, did J-Lo not get on the horse? Is that all stunt double horse riding?
Yeah. So, and I thought it was cool, and you get this feeling that something's very off here as soon as you see her riding the horse. She gets off the horse, and the horse turns into a statue.
But she looks back and smiles at it. She's like, oh, that's beautiful. And I was like, that was another thing. I was like, oh, you can't ride the horse closer to where you're going? Because once she gets off the horse, she still has to go up a big hill and come down. But I kind of got that as a subconscious way of you don't want to spook the child. You're trying to get to this child and you don't want to spook their psyche. So you're going to come in slow and steady and be cool, man. Like you're talking someone down from jumping off a building. That kind of was the vibe I was getting from her.
So when she's in this dream desert sequence, she walks to a place where there's a bunch of trees in the middle of the desert. And she meets a boy that she first calls Mr. E.
Yeah.
And
Mr. E. Edward E. Enigma.
A little boy.
Riddler.
A little boy who is having the dream sequence, and she asks him to, guide her on a boat. And he imagines a boat that's all broken down. And
she said, weren't we supposed to sail today?
Yep.
Yeah.
And she's basically trying to figure out what's going on in his comatose brain and what's keeping him trapped there and what's going on. And this is when little Edward brings up that he should warn her of something called the Maculok. It's the boogeyman. And he says, quote, Maculok wants me here where I am. He's a monster. Maculok wants me here where I am. He's a monster. And J-Lo tries her best to convince him that it's just made up. It's just made up. There's no such thing as
just the two of us.
Yeah.
We're going to go sailing. And then he makes a little boat.
And she's like, all right, cool.
We can work with this. Yeah. But then...
And unfortunately, he's still so afraid of this... I don't even know what this Maculok is supposed to represent. It was a question mark for me all throughout the movie.
They mention later that he... his injury had something to do with the ocean and about... Like, his fear of water came from that. And I think this is... a representation of that fear. This monster that doesn't want him to go near water, have anything to do with anyone that wants him to go into water.
Well, unfortunately, she's not able to break through, so she disconnects from the technology, and we see her suspended in this... I don't know how to describe it, but it was basically a tight skin red suit that looked like it was like muscle tissue, almost like
I said it looks like a Cenobite got a hold of her. Actually, like she was missing her skin
a little bit. Yeah. But it reminded me even more of, have you ever seen 1992 Bram Stoker's Dracula with Gary Oldman, the suit of armor that Gary Oldman's Dracula would wear?
Oh yeah,
it has like a muscle. Yeah, it reminded me of that. That's what she's wearing. She's suspended from these
That's
cables.
another movie I'd like to do for the podcast.
Definitely,
at some point. Yeah.
That's a star-studded fucking cast right there.
Yeah.
But it reminded me a lot of the Dracula armor, what she was wearing. She's suspended from these cables. Yeah. She has like this cloth with... this is how 2000s it is. The cloth over her face.
Has a microchip over her eyeball.
Yeah, it's just like a microchip embedded in this cloth that's supposed to be like the sensory deprivation helmet. Yeah. I was like, that is so not... That's not technology that would have worked.
Is that how that works?
But
like,
hey,
it's really just just plays white noise. Like it just puts over her ears and plays sounds on the ocean.
And it was funny. And I was like, all right, that makes sense for a 2000s prop. But I liked the look of what they were doing for this technology. It was very cool, simple but cool.
Yeah, with the table that rises up to meet you and then comes back down, so that you are in fact suspended. And there's a great comparison to our villain. This whole suspension thing, which we'll get to when we get to him. And we get to his intro.
When she disconnects from the dream, we see the child that is there. And at first, I thought the child was alive. I thought he was breathing, moving about. Because when they took the cloth off, his eyes were open. But then we come to find out, I was like, oh, his eyes are only open because he can't close them. Yeah. He's in a coma.
Yeah, that boy is in a coma.
Shit. So then we get a cutaway to them having a meeting with the parents.
Yeah.
And this one... I don't know how I felt about it, because the parents are in there discussing, maybe we should just give this up. We don't really believe in what you're doing anymore because it's been over a year.
We want to transfer him to a different hospital.
We just want to leave him there. The father straight up says he wants to just commit him and leave him there, checked in, and be done with it. Because he shared this, we don't believe in what you've been doing. It's been a year, there's been no results.
I wrote, for a shrink, she doesn't really listen, because she keeps asking why he wants to stop, and he keeps saying, there's no proof that you're making any progress.
Exactly.
And she just keeps asking, like, but why do he wants to quit? He's like, is no proof.
Yeah.
Like, he says it so many times.
And I think that's where the bad acting comes in, because, like, he's saying one thing, but her scene is saying another.
Yeah, it's almost like they were filmed separately.
Yeah.
But again, you can't blame J-Lo for that. That's the script. She's reading the lines she was given.
and so it's very, very upsetting for her. They're like, no, we're just going to fucking take the kid away, commit him to a home where he can be looked after. And they do talk him into 6 more months, I believe. I don't know if that's here or a little later on. It's right afterwards, whenever before the FBI gets involved. But they do get a slight extension, because this kid is the only reason why they have this technology.
Yeah. It was developed. When stuff happens to rich white children, you've got to take action.
I knew you were going to bring it up. You
got to do something. You can't just... I mean, if it was a poor kid, you wouldn't worry about it. But this is a very rich white child, so we really need to jump in and help with fucking $1 billion technology. You see this facility a lot, and it is very much out of the future. Like, even the architecture of it and the windows, and like it's a very futuristic, like, think California Hollywood Hills, like, future mansion is what this place looks like.
Have you ever seen what the Google campus looks like?
Yes,
it looks like Google campus.
It's got Google vibes.
Yeah. And so after the disheartening notion that like, well, we're still going to take him away. We'll give you a few more months, but we're still taking him out of here when it's all said and done.
Right.
We get I thought this was very odd. It cuts immediately from that conversation to a random tortoise or turtle, don't know what it was, crawling through the dry-ass cornfield. I don't understand.
I thought we were back in the kid's mind. I was like,
that's what I thought too. It was just an abrupt cut shot, and I was like, what is this turtle supposed to fucking symbolize? What does this tortoise symbolize?
How slow the plot's moving right now.
Yeah. Well, I mean, with that said, it leads to an important shot, which is a truck coming into view with a cute little albino doggy.
Oh my god,
a beautiful
I love that
little
dog.
albino husky.
I love that dog so much.
And it's in the countryside, and this man, I gotta say, the haircut on this dude, the wig that they gave him was terrible.
There is a weird rule that if you're a serial killer, you also have to have horrible hair. I don't know why. That's just the rule.
I mean, Vincent D'Onofrio made it work. He made it work.
Yeah.
But it was still just a very weird haircut wig that they gave him with. Anyways, so we see this man with his cute little doggy parking his little, truck, goes up to this warehouse.
Dilapidated farm
warehouse.
It's
like a silo warehouse.
With some silos. And
he opens up and he looks like he's just looking around for to me, it looked like he was looking around for the first time, kind of like, what's up in here? Yeah. He goes in, and you see
one would assume, from what we find out later, they was checking to make sure no one else had been here.
Exactly. Yeah. And so when we get this man walking around the corner, we see a giant, how would you describe it, Reno? A fish tank for humans?
Yeah.
I would call it a fish tank for humans.
Yeah, like I decided that normally this is not the first time we've had a serial killer that kind of turns their murder into like an art. But this is the first one I understood because it was kind of beautiful. Because you have this woman who is a corpse floating suspended in water. Like, all her movements are gentle because, you're in water. And she's just floating there in this tank that's it's a glass tank with like metal reinforced sides. And the water is all the way to the top. So, obviously, no chance of breathing.
She's been flooded and drowned.
She's been flooded and drowned. But it was she kind of looked like an angel sitting there floating. And I was like, this is the first time I've seen a serial killer's work and not been like, you just cut open her ribs and like put bird skulls in there. Like, that's not fucking art. You're just doing some weird shit. Yeah. Like this, I was like, this I get. Finally, I can start my serial killer. I've just been waiting for inspiration.
Now you found it.
Goreship, I am in like Flint.
Oh boy. Well, if you're anything like this serial killer, you won't be able to actually handle the physical confrontation because he gets a death rattle and it scares the shit out of him.
Yeah, he's got his hand on the glass, kind of touching her hand where it's like floating.
Yeah.
And then she does a little
death rattle
jerk. And he fucking flips. He jumps 30 feet backwards almost.
And he I don't know if you caught this. So when he runs and he gets away and hides behind his stack of TV monitors that had been recording her death, he's also holding his boner down.
Yeah.
And like stopping himself from having an erection.
Yep.
Because this dude was getting off to the site of her dead body.
He only feels safe watching her through a camera, not like
actually touching her.
Not while she's moving. Anyway. Yeah.
Can't, like if she's alive, he can't get off.
Yeah.
And so that was our first quick little jarring horror scene. Yeah. And so he gets out and he winds up flushing the water out from a valve.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, this dude has this whole fucking place rigged.
This is an operation. This is not a thing he did spur of the moment. This is a plan.
Yeah, this is a kill room.
Yeah, this is a kill room. This is an orchestrated kill room.
And after our first little taste of what this serial killer does and what he's like, you get the sense he's very weird. He's weird. He is fucking weird.
That's safe.
From his look to the way that his body posture.
Unlike Silence of the Lambs, he's not a guy who can pass in normal company. He's too awkward.
Yeah, he doesn't have the charisma. He has no real social adaptability.
Yeah.
And it's your first little taste of how weird this fucking guy is, and his weird sexual issues with living women.
Yeah.
And we get a quick cut back, and now we're talking to, I believe, Catherine.
Well,
is discussing something. She wants to talk to Marion about reversing the feed of the technology so she can go into Edward's mind.
Yeah.
And Marion pretty much says that it's a bad idea because the whole point of going into their mind is to help coax them into believing, they're in a dream.
Yeah.
And if they go into yours, you may get lost with them in your mind.
Well, also, it will be extremely jarring for them.
Yeah.
Because they're not in their safe place anymore. They're somewhere completely unfamiliar. You've got to explain to them what happened, and you have to do it before they have a psychotic break for being shot into your brain.
And it could kill both of you.
Yeah. So, and here's the thing. I kind of... Later on, and this shouldn't be a spoiler, not only because you've already seen the movie, but also because they bring this up, which means it's going to come into play,
yeah.
Or they wouldn't. It's what's the gun? Not Schrodinger.
The smoking gun?
Not Schrodinger's gun. It's fucking Chekhov's gun. Like, they introduced it here, which means it's got to be fired later. Later, obviously, she's going to have to put someone in her brain, or they wouldn't have mentioned it here. But I wish there had been more with it, because she's like, I don't think anything will go wrong. And they're like, here's a long list of things that can go wrong. And then when it happens, it seems like very little... I don't know. It seemed like J-Lo was right, even though the scientists that created this and know all the ins and outs of it. There didn't seem to be a whole lot of negative repercussions.
For me, it was them laying the foundation of, she has a goal, she's being told no, they won't listen to her.
Yeah.
She's going to do it later, and then it'll pay off in the long run.
Yeah.
It was just, laying the foundation of, it's going to come full circle, and what she originally wanted her to do will be the thing she gets to at the end of the movie.
Yeah, you will see it, or they wouldn't have brought it up.
And it's just funny, because she gets told no. Except for Marion's look, I get where you're coming from.
Yeah.
I would want to do it too, but don't do it.
Yeah, you want to help these people, and I understand that, but you aren't taking any precaution. You are impatient, and therefore you just want to, blow into this untested thing. Whereas everything we're doing now, it's all untested. So that might be a bridge too far at this point.
And so, unfortunately, she just decides to, okay, I'll let it go.
Yeah.
And we get a cut scene of her smoking a joint.
Let me ask you a question.
FBI agent smoking a joint. Totally, or not FBI, but a fucking neuroscientist just smoking a joint.
Because they're cool. That's how you much like in Poltergeist, that's how you show they're cool.
Yeah, I mean, and just like Poltergeist, we get the booty shot for some reason.
Because it's J-Lo. How could you make a movie and not show her butt? That seems a little crazy. I will also say this. One of my favorite looks in the entire world is the work shirt and underwear on the lady. I'm a big fan. I also have never encountered it in real life, even when I was sleeping with girls who worked in work shirts.
Yeah, usually,
that's not how you get comfortable. You don't leave on your button-up shirt.
No, you put on a big comfy...
You put on a big, huge sweatshirt or a tank top.
Or your boyfriend's shirt or something.
Yeah, so it's a look I love, but it's a look I've never seen outside of movies. Don't know if it exists outside of movies.
Yeah, I don't think it does.
Sound off in the comments. I've never seen it.
Yeah, if you lived through that and seen it, more props to you. But yeah, and any female that actually does that, if you do that, please speak up.
Explain how that's comfortable.
Yeah, every woman, including my fiance that I'm with now, her go-to comfort is, all right, get into a big comfy shirt, like one of my t-shirts, like a band t-shirt or something, and yes, maybe still underwear, but at least there's a shirt, it's not a blouse. It's definitely not a blouse.
It is not something that buttons up your neck and at the cuffs. That is constraining. That's not comfortable.
And so while we get this...
what the hell is she watching on TV?
She's actually... It's a Queen music video.
Thank you.
It's a Queen music video.
I knew
so
I
was actually about to stop talking about that.
Yeah.
So... we get this cut back and forth between her smoking weed and then her beautiful ass looking inside the fridge because she somehow already has the munchies after 2 hits.
That part I can relate to.
And then we cut to the killer, who we still don't have a name for yet, smoking a cigarette while bathing this victim in a white milky paint substance, which we don't know at the time what it is.
Yeah.
And it winds up making them look like this very creepy... pure white porcelain skin character with burnt yellow eyes.
Yeah. We're dolling them up because, again, you have to make them as little like an actual dangerous woman as you can.
Now,
and more like an inanimate object or a piece of art.
With them showing the victim's body and what it looks like when it's being, colored over, and he's operating on them to make them his doll.
Yeah.
That's the best way to call him. He turns them into his dolls. His fucking doll, creepy, disturbing fuck dolls. You cut back to Catherine watching a Queen music video, creepy cartoon. Notice how the creepy characters in the music video, their eyes look like the eyes of the victim that we just saw who was being transformed.
Yeah.
It's the same, like, metaphorical representation of what you see in that person versus what the little creature things look like in the music video.
I will also say good on her, because I can't watch stuff like that while I'm really, really high. Like, it'll creep me out too much. Like, she's braver than I. I'd be like, no, we're gonna need something a little calmer.
and while she's falling asleep to that creepy ass music video, the cartoon music video, she starts having that weird, Arabian Nights sand dream again. This time where she is trying to pull what she views as Edward into her mind, and she winds up coming back to that desert where there's no water, and she finds the broken down little canoe boat. Yeah. And when she looks inside of it, she's like, "It's okay, Edward, come on out." And what pops out is this shark-looking boy, and she just jumps awake.
Yeah, it's a combination of the monster he was earlier and a sea creature and the boy that he is.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so it's this amalgam, as in dreams, like this smush up of...
She wakes up, she realizes, okay, maybe I should turn this TV off.
Yeah,
So that was the one smart thing right there.
Yeah.
And once that happens, we cut back to...
Carl living that hook life!
Yeah, so this was very... I forgot about this. Okay, so watching the scene for the first time again in a very long time, it was a little off-putting. A little off-putting. So I'm not the biggest fan of suspension. I don't mean to offend people who do body art like that.
Well, I don't think people that do that can be offended if that's not your bag.
Yeah, it's hard for me to watch.
Yeah.
I'll watch a lot of crazy shit in like a deathmatch wrestling and blood and what, but there's something about watching you get the hooks through your skin and hanging from wire. That one is a little hard for me to.
No wonder Hellraiser hits you so hard, because there's a lot of that in the Hellraiser movies.
But like willingly doing it is a whole nother level.
Honestly, if I got to pick, I'd rather willingly do it than unwillingly do it.
Hey, at least the unwillingly just rip me apart. The other one.
It ends quicker if it's unwilling.
So Carl is suspended from meat hooks. He's got himself lifted over the victim's body.
Yeah.
And so while he's suspended from these meat hooks that are all up and down his back and his legs and his arms, he cuts on his TV and he's replaying the video of the woman drowning in the tank.
And we definitely see his O face.
Yeah, and he starts masturbating violently over the corpse of the woman that he just murdered and videotaped.
There's enough white gunk on that lady already. Please don't add to it.
This just reminds me so much of all the true crimes that I watch with my fiance. This part right here, and she was watching. She's like, oh yeah, that's a typical MO.
Yeah.
She's like, we watch Criminal Minds. You should know by now that's what they do. It's weird shit like that. And I thought about it. I was like, I know, but it hits a little bit differently. Like watching this dude do it versus having someone on the TV just read a file saying that that's what they do.
I also want to quickly bring up, and this will happen again later, but this is the exact opposite of J-Lo's position when she goes into someone's mind. Because he's hanging from his back with the hooks. She hangs with her back towards the ground with her hooks. Well, not hooks, but with the ropes that suspend her. So there's a definite inversion of kind of a heaven and hell thing of him looking down, she would be looking up, going on here. And it gets reflected later in their final battle, which I'm excited to talk about when we get there. But this is the first inkling we get of it, and of him being an inverse of her.
You get this real drastic perversion of what he does to their bodies just in this quick glimpse. So you see, like, basically what we will now come to find out is him bleaching the bodies.
Yep.
And him bleaching the bodies is what causes that chemical burn to their eyes to change their eyes to this weird amber, black, and yellow color.
Yeah, it's very fortunate.
It's a chemical burn.
It's very fortunate that it both changes the eye color and bleaches the skin, because he seems to be a big fan of both. And it's lucky. When you're a serial killer, you got to worry about budget. And if you can do both with one chemical, like chef's kiss. But hey, don't take my word for it. The next scene is the cops finding the body, and they say the same thing.
Yeah, so the FBI are...
that this girl got bleached.
The FBI have been tracking him apparently for some time because he is a serial killer who's been dumping body.
Yeah.
He dumped this body over a bridge, and that's when, in the conversation, they discuss, well, he used bleach on this body again.
Yeah.
He coated the entire body, and that's what causes it to change and get basically chemical burned to bleach them to an albino.
Yep.
And
that's when we introduced Ramsey, Teddy, and Peter, our three main cops.
Another tidbit that was added when they found the body, they discussed that he left a metal collar on her neck.
Yeah.
It's a torture sex collar.
Yeah.
Basically, when it closes around the neck, it puts these spikes into the side of your throat and in near your jugular.
Yeah.
Where if you struggle too hard, it'll puncture it.
Yeah.
And so that was another thing that he did for a torture device.
Other clues include semen on the body and a tire track that they recognize from the other drop-off points.
And he actually ran into the guardrail so they can check the paint chips.
Yeah, a little bit of scratchy paint.
And so he's basically... This killer is just ramping up, and it cuts after the first introduction of the FBI. It cuts to him stalking another victim.
Yeah.
And this gave me such Criminal Minds vibes because I've been watching too much of that shit lately.
Yeah.
And I was like, this is exactly almost a one-for-one shot of how the FBI will find a body on true crime shows and in Criminal Minds. Then Criminal Minds will cut to oh, here's the killer in question.
We have to show that there's someone else in danger because this person's, it no longer matters.
Yeah, it's the same formula. Same
Yeah.
exact formula.
Yeah.
And so once we see him stalking, we also notice that while he's lurking, something's going on with his head. He's having some type of psychotic break. Did you catch it?
Well,
he's grabbing his... But there's a voice in his head when he's having the headaches. It's some type of psychotic break.
Yeah.
And he takes a bunch of Bayer aspirin for his headache.
Yeah, he's self-medicating to stop his... what we will find out later is his schizophrenia. A very rare form of schizophrenia that is also resulting in these very bad headaches.
And so when we get that glimpse of him self-medicating, we cut back to a diner meetup. Typical FBI, just they gotta have their slice of pie, meet up for a diner.
Yeah. Yeah, the autopsy reports come back.
And they're
Teddy, our grumpy old man, finds something in the autopsy report that gets him all hot and bothered. He charges out. I don't know if there's something else you want to talk about.
Oh, no, I thought you were going to talk about what they found.
Yes, so they go back. Here's the funny thing. He could have let the rest of them stay there and finish their pie because he was going back. It probably took an hour or two to get this specimen, get it under the microscope, screw it in, find out what it is, search the database. But the whole time they're just standing there watching him work and probably having to be quiet every time they try it. Because he's the grizzled old cop. He's the lead detective on this. And every time they try and say something, he's probably hush, I'm working. But eventually he gives out the goods. And the good is that this hair that they found was from an albino dog fur. And there's not a lot of those. If we combine that with the car that we know that he drove, we might actually be able to narrow down our suspect list. And that makes them all very excited.
It also leads them to create basically a criminal profile. And this, again, was another Criminal Minds callback theme, where basically, I forget which agent it was, he says that it explains why he bleach burns his victims the way he does. Because he's in love with his dog, and so that's why he's in love with the look that he creates for his victims.
Yeah, he considers it like a perfect specimen of the dog.
And once we get this little tidbit of information that, the albino dog we saw earlier is the fucking serial killer's doggy, we then get this... I hate to say it, it's a sad scene where you see the serial killer use his fucking dog to kidnap women.
I know, that dog is
and I was the dog doesn't know what it's doing, but it's evil.
Yeah.
Unknowingly evil.
Yeah.
The doggy is trained.
It's just like when you train pit bulls to fight other dogs. That pit bull ain't bad. Its owner's a piece of shit. Don't take it on that cute little puppy.
and it was just hard seeing this doggy committed to the bit. It pretended to lay down behind this woman's car. And
he put a stone there to prevent his dog from getting run over.
He loves his dog. He loves his dog.
Yeah. I know. It was a little... Just, number one, it was clever. And number two, he knows he is too socially awkward to approach without making this woman very uncomfortable. When she comes to the parking deck and it's abandoned, she pulls her taser or mace, I don't remember.
It's just like a mace bar.
Yeah. She pulls her mace out. So she knows, hey, I'm alone in a parking deck, walking to my car. This is a time to be alert for danger.
And having the dog...
When you see an animal in pain, especially a cute one, like a dog or a cat, that thinking goes out the window. You're like, oh my god, I heard an innocent beast. She gets out to go check on the dog, notices there's a stone under her tire, and by then it's too late.
And he does the old school form of, like, basically tackling her to the ground and chloroforming her. And it takes, like, forever for her to pass out.
Yeah.
This is probably one of the most realistic chloroform things I've ever seen, because he's on the ground for a minute struggling with her before she finally goes out.
This is the kind of, like, weird kidnapping thing that Facebook always warns you about. Like, old people on Facebook are like, if you see a penny on your car hood, don't get out to come get it out. They mark your car with pennies, and then they come kidnap you later. And I'm like, Grandpa, shut up. You're not making any sense. But this is kind of like a scheme, a very well-formed scheme to get this particular woman who he had been stalking earlier, because the women he turns into dolls have to have very particular facial features. They have to look a certain way to be the kind of doll that he wants.
Exactly.
They seem to all be white women. They seem to all have, like, a very petite body type and a face that, like, he has a type, I guess, is what all I'm really trying to say.
They are all women who remind him of his mother. So that comes back
also,
into play.
The dog is named Valentine, and as a Valentino, I'm a little offended, but I'll be okay.
And so, after we get to see more of the process of the killer, we've got an introduction to, like, his... Alright, so this is the... It's kind of an out-of-sequence way he operates, where we're getting it shown backwards. So we see the dead victim, we see the post-death cleanup, and what he does for his ritual. Yeah. Then we see the initial process of how he stalks, how he kidnaps. Yeah. So we're kind of getting an out-of-order sequence, but we're seeing every step he does, whether it's in order or not. Yeah. And it's very, like, holy shit, dude. Man, yeah. The fact that this is not far off from something an actual person has done or will do in real life is very... 23 years later, after the movie came out, still very jarring to think about. Like, this is not far off from something that will happen or can or has happened.
Like if you have a serial killer, one of the ways they get that moniker, it's because they have a methodology that makes them kind of unique in this. And his is something else, but it shows a lot of. He's got a kink, and it takes a lot of work to make it come off correctly. And so he's got a fucking process for every step. You can tell this is like whatever victim, number 9 or number 10.
I forget. I lost count. They did say it. But
yeah, they did say it. But like he's getting too good at this. And Vince Vaughn also mentions during one of the meetings that he's escalating, he's going quicker. He either thinks he's untouchable or he wants to be caught, which is what I believe.
That was what was in my notes, because I was thinking about how, like, they're having another behavior analysis meeting discussing on what's going on with this guy, and they say he's ramped up the time frame of his killings now, and he's doing it more sloppy. He went from doing it 6 months apart to only 6 days apart. Now he's either getting sloppy or he wants to be caught, according to what Vince Vaughn was saying to all of them. He believes that he wants to be caught. That's what Novak, Vince Vaughn's character,
and I think that will turn out to be true as we go into his mind later. At least there is a part of him that wants to be caught.
And luckily, that comes just right around the corner, because they get a lead on the dog agency that sold that specific breed of albino dog. Yep. And then they matched up to people who own that same color car, which would be a truck, and they matched up to only one person.
Yep. So they have an address now. So it's time for SWAT raid!
We get his name. The killer is named Carl Starger.
Yep. Carl Rudolph Starger.
Yeah, sorry, I forgot the middle name.
Don't forget the big red nose middle name.
Carl Rudolph Starger. And when they announce who he is, we get a cutscene to Carl, who's just in the bathtub getting ready to have a final psychotic break.
Have another one of his attacks.
And he's just laying there, he's talking to himself, calling,
He's singing the, creepily enough, a song my grandfather used to sing to me to put me to sleep. Lambsy dotes and something else. Lambsy dotes and the oats, but little Lambsy divey, I'd divey too, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
Like it's a little song, a little ditty my grandfather used to sing.
I wasn't sure what it was.
Well, nursery rhyme's probably actually more correct, but yeah, it's something my grandfather used to sing to me when he was putting me to bed back in the day. So it's real weird to have a serial killer sing it to me while he's spitting water out in his bathtub. But yes, he has another episode, and he reaches for his bare aspirin, but dun dun dun, it's empty.
Yeah, and this is more of the stuff I was talking about, where it looks like he's being like, when his brain is going into overwork mode and he can't take pills to help him. You hear like a demonic voice in him when it's jerking his head. Yeah. Like something is trying to get out of him. So that's the point of the movie where you're like, okay, I know this is kind of a true crime thing, and this is about like psychological horror and whatnot, but is he possessed? Because the way that the film, I guess the audio for me more than anything shows it, is when he's jerking around, you hear his normal voice, and then you hear like a deep like behind him trying to break free and talking to him.
It could be a supernatural aspect, but it also is common for people with certain types of severe schizophrenia to speak in different voices, sometimes even with like accents of countries they've never been to, and like more multiple personality disorder, or which has been, it's got a new name now, I don't remember what it is. They've changed it in the book, but
yeah, he's getting ready to have this final like, you know, really bad head issue.
Yeah, so he's like running to the pantry to try and find more.
He's butt-ass naked. He just hops out of the bathtub because it's so painful. He's like, I gotta get up. He's butt-ass naked running through his house.
Once again, Judgmental Horror Junkies bringing you the guy penises and asses that you've been asking for. Every movie, it seems like. We're really
There's always one. There's always at least one.
Yeah.
That's unintended canon.
Yeah. So while he's looking for medicine, we cut to the SWAT team getting ready to bust his house down. They have surrounded
this man's house. They're ready to kick that shit in. Yep. And alright, so this is funny for me. It's very funny. When they finally...
I hope you're getting ready to say the same thing I thought was funny.
So they surround the house. They burst in the door. They run up the stairs. They go into his room. They're searching. They're searching the bathroom. They're searching. They finally come downstairs, and this motherfucker was on the ground, passed out right in front of them. They just ran right by him on the floor.
Seemed like a lot of work preparing this SWAT team.
Yeah.
My favorite, actually, the part that I thought, that part is funny, but the part I thought was funny was one of the SWAT guys comes into one of the rooms and the dog's in there, and he puts the gun on him and goes, I got the dog! Yeah. And he sounded so proud. I was like, that must be the best day of that little SWAT man's life. Like,
I thought about that,
he's
but
like,
then...
I got the dog! I got the dog! Like it was a prize that you win. Like,
this is the dog we've been hearing all about.
Yeah, that's a famous dog. I got him. I mean, it's a beautiful dog. I probably would have reacted the same way. Actually, I would have set my gun down and started playing with the dog. I'd be like, I've got this room covered. And just petting the dog. I gotta keep the dog calm. And the dog's like calm anyway, but I'm just playing with him. I'm like,
so after the ridiculous I got the dog thing,
we found our guy.
Yeah, he was just
on the floor for nothing.
On the floor the entire time, passed out.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, it was a very severe pass out, because now we have discovered, once he's been sent off to the hospital. So they send Carl off to the hospital, and the agents go to his basement, where you see all these creepy, ripped up Barbie dolls with, like, you know, rabbit skull heads put on them.
More art I kind of get.
Yeah, mutilated.
Like, that's stuff I liked. That's good art.
They're, like, all over the wall. There's, like, this little kid crown drawing that says liar, bitches, whores. They all deserve it. You know, the typical misogynistic trauma.
There was one I liked particularly well. There was a one of these mutilated dolls dressed like a nurse next to a mirror, and he'd written in blood or lipstick or something, "Are you well?" with a question mark, and I was like,
very Riddler.
I got the question. I got the answer to that question, my friend. No, sir.
And so when the FBI are searching his basement, they find his suspension chains and table where he would lay his victims, and you get this first look of you also get a look of a weird symbol. Now, I thought at first the symbol was some type of culty symbol, and I thought it added more to the idea of, like, possession or something. Right. Because they keep showing this fucking symbol. It's on the table, on both sides of the table where he laid down. And so, unfortunately, it doesn't pay off for that, but it does pay off as...
It's kind of funny, because I assume the reason it keeps showing up in his mind is because, I'm going to ask you this may be an experience that you do not share, but I remember a lot of times in school, when I would zone out in certain classes, there would always be a thing I looked at. Like in one class, there was a crack in one of the tiles, and while I was zoned out, I would always just look at that crack. And that was the thing I focused on while my mind was a million miles away. I wonder if this symbol on this table was what he would focus on while suspended, post coitus maybe while he's just still hanging there. Like, the thing that he just looks at when his eyes aren't focused.
I still, to this day, will do that. I'll be looking, I'll be staring off, and if I see like a pattern in something.
And I wonder if that's why the pattern was just kept being represented in his brain or not. It was just a theory I had, because I was with you. I was like, man, this symbol's got to be important.
Yeah, it was just funny. They're looking all around, and so I don't know if you noticed it, but while they're searching, the FBI fucks up. They activate Starger's booby trap, where his latest victim is hidden. Mm-hmm. So when the FBI turn the controls on to activate all the TVs and stuff, they activate the cell she's being held in.
Yeah. Now this cell is I almost said millions of miles away in space. No, many miles away out in the desert where he was at the beginning of the movie.
Yep.
This is not at his apartment. But they know it's happening because a video TV cuts on in the basement.
And they're like, this is the girl that was reported missing.
Yes.
Fuck.
Yeah, we gotta find her.
Yeah.
We've got... And they know because of his previous victims that they have a certain small, like 3-day window from the time she's taken to the time she is a corpse to find her. So they know that it's automated. They know the clock is ticking. So now you've got your rub because this dude's in a coma. Real quick aside, the dude that tells him, the autopsy doctor, is also one of the main character's friends in Jacob's Ladder, which is another movie I want to do at some point.
Okay, I recognize him.
I think he was in Platoon, too.
Dude,
he's a real famous guy because one of his eyes is real twitchy.
Yes, he was in Constantine. That's what I knew him
yes,
from. He was the alcoholic preacher in Constantine. Yeah. He was also the serial killer in Identity with John Cusack.
Because of the eye, he gets a lot of horror movie roles because he just has kind of a creepy look to him. No offense to this actor. But, yeah, I saw him there and I was like, hey, I know that guy from 8,000 Other Horror... Again, another person whose name I don't know, but I've seen in a million movies.
He passed away, unfortunately, 2 years ago.
Yeah, I'd heard that.
Yeah, and I was really looking forward to see him coming back in the Constantine movie as an angel.
Oh, yeah. That would have been nice.
But he was also... I recognized him first from Constantine and then Identity with John Cusack. Because he plays, like, the actual physical embodiment of the serial killer in Identity, where... He's the guy that has all the personalities up in his head that whole movie takes place in.
Yeah, that was so good.
So yeah, but when...
so we have a problem that in 2023 would be solved by the car's GPS. But since we don't have that now, we've got to figure out where this lady is.
I wanted to talk real quick about what the scientist, the doctor says about Carl's issue.
The form of...
Yeah, so they discover that Carl has a neurological disorder that has been... in him since birth. It's a genetic predisposition that attacks the utero cells. So when he was being born as a baby, his cells were born with this neurodegenerative disorder. Mm-hmm. And it has caused him a break from reality and completely disappear into himself catatonically, which means he's never coming back.
Yeah.
His brain...
They asked when he's going to wake up so we can question him. He's like, never.
He's stuck in there on a permanent dream cycle. And
which is a problem unless you know someone who can go in people's minds.
Yeah.
I don't know
it just so happens to be like, well, he's stuck in a catatonic dream state inside his own mind for the rest of his life.
And we need info.
Because his brain has deteriorated so much that one section of his brain has completely eroded away, and there's no wall holding those two segments back from each other. So now they're intertwining.
Yeah.
And... ironically, his name was Dr. Reed. Dr. Reed is like, he's like, if only you could go into someone's dream.
And then...
hold on a second.
Apparently he knows about this institute.
Yeah, he knows about Catherine and her team of people at the Neuroscience Center.
Yeah, and I will say this. The next scene is the FBI there at the center trying to convince this team to go into his mind, right? And they literally are showing J-Lo the drowning video, and I'm like, that seems a little cruel and unnecessary.
Trying to twist their arm.
Yeah, you probably could have just mentioned it.
Emotionally blackmail them, traumatize her into doing your bidding.
Yeah, now this is not a position we normally take on the show, but I'm going to say ACAB for this.
Yeah, that was a little fucked.
What
that was
asshole.
quite fucked.
Yeah, what a fucking asshole.
It's like, I'm going to show you this traumatic shit that's evidence that shouldn't be shown to the public, so maybe it'll twist your heartstrings enough to actually want to help find.
Yeah.
Well, we do actually get what the victim's name is. The latest victim who's abducted, her name is Julia.
Yeah.
We at least find that out.
Yep.
Because before then, she was just some random blonde.
Yeah. We met, they have a quick scene where they meet with her parents and explain why they think it's this guy again, which of course it turns out that it is. I also said that a lot of people at this institute have the job of staring as things happen. Because I watched this movie, and there's probably 8 or 9 different times where, like, 3 people are doing something, and everyone else in the hallway is just watching it happen.
Yep.
And I'm like, what do we pay the rest of you for?
Yeah, it's like
there's 3 people here working, and the rest of you literally, I guess, keep the coffee pot filled up and watch things happen. And you're like, get rid of these fuckers.
So after all that fucking blackmail, emotional manipulation, whatever you want to call it, that they're fucking doing, they wind up telling them, no, we've gotten approval from the fucking FBI and the government, Congress, to go into the serial killer's mind. It's been approved.
Yeah.
Like, just
all we're waiting on is you guys to approve it, because you, of course, have the right of refusal. And, if you don't want, because it is dangerous, probably. We don't know anything about this technology. But the guy in charge is like, yeah, it's dangerous.
They do warn her about the potential hazard of what could happen going into his mind, because his mind is so strong and so much different than Edward's.
They say that there is always a danger of believing that what's happening to you is real. And if that happens, you're lost.
They bring up the age-old adage of if you die in your sleep, you die in real life. Yeah. I thought that was hilarious that they brought that age-old... He even says, it's an old wives' tale.
Yeah. It's like, oh yeah, tell that to the first Nightmare on Elm Street movie. Because they also said that like 30 times in that movie.
We get this cool little understanding of what the actual technology is. I like the way that they explained it.
I did too.
It's very simple. For anybody that watches sci-fi stuff, sometimes they over-complex the fucking procedures of time travel or entering.
This was much more like, you don't need to know how it happens, but here's what happens. Yeah. Explained in very simple terms. And then we get, I love watching J-Lo go into his mind. I call it the bees, because you got baby dolls, baptisms, bugs, blood, and a black dog. Like, as she's shooting through his head. It was awesome.
But before we, just to clarify on the sequence, in case anybody has watched this and you're confused about what's happening exactly, the machine is called the neurological catalyst, and what it does is it maps the brain of the subject, allows someone else to go into, or quote-unquote, tune in and explore their mind.
Yeah.
But it also works for the other way. You can reverse speed and bring someone into your mind.
Yeah.
And
which
because
they've
of this,
never done.
Yeah, because of this, they've also inserted a failsafe into J-Lo's hand. It's a little chip that she presses.
She can press it and get out.
And they do that because, like Reno said, there's been a chance that you could wind up believing that their world is real. Yeah. And if you do that, you wind up having the potential to die inside their mind.
Yeah. You also have to leave, from my understanding, you have to leave. You have to hit it to leave anyway, and you have to leave on your own. They can't yank you out.
Yeah.
You've got to leave yourself. And they also had a third rig set up, because they used to try co-counseling. But for their literally one patient, he didn't like anybody. He didn't like anybody but Catherine. So Catherine,
she's the most run with this technology. She's the most well equipped.
So
and you know what's funny? We only find this out because the FBI is doubting her right before they go under, and they have her go into to Starker's mind. The FBI is like, you really think she's good enough for this? You really think she's qualified?
Well, they also don't believe in the tech, much like the parents of this child.
They don't believe in her. They don't believe in her, but guess what? Yeah. We need more coworkers like this that are your fucking homies. Yeah. Because the rest of the people, Marion and Dr. West, they're hyping her up. Yeah. They straight up are like, no, Catherine is amazing.
She didn't have as much experience, but she was willing to... And again, this is shown in her character earlier when she's trying to pull people into her mind. She was willing to take risk that no one else was, which is what made her perfect for this.
And Dr. West should have said that Marion and Catherine came from a previous facility where they were the only two willing to go above and beyond, and they no one would step up. Those two shine the brightest.
You really end up kind of falling in love with this team. Like they
have each other's backs.
Yeah, they got each other's backs.
And so I thought that was cool that while you see straight up the fucking government agents are like, I don't think this is going to work. I don't believe that she'll be able to come through with it.
I don't even believe this tech is real.
Yeah, her own team is like, shut up and watch.
Yeah, exactly. Like, fucking watch. Son.
And then we get the really cool fucking entrance sequence into his mind, and I love
the bees,
the creepy doll faces that are like intertwined, the baby dolls,
and then the weird upside down baptism, which is a scene. Speaking of things taking homages from this movie, that they copy later in the video game BioShock Infinite. If you've ever played it, there's a reverse baptism.
I don't think I've played
where you start out under the water and come up through it, and it's fucking. Because while they're doing it, you have a gospel singing "Will the Circle Be Unbroken," and it's a work of art. But directly stolen from this, like the way she comes out of the...
Well, BioShock came out after this movie, so...
That's what I say, directly.
Okay.
BioShock directly stole it from this.
Yeah, so we get this really trippy, very, very psychologically horrifying sequence of her entering his mind. These are the first things he sees. Mm-hmm. She sees our mutilated baby dolls in the veins, coming out of the dirt, a dog, a black dog.
Yeah,
you see
an exact replica of the white dog that he has in real life.
The inverse. Yeah. And then him, what we believe is him, forcefully being baptized. It's a forced baptism because they're holding him under the water.
They will mention later that that's when all this first started, because the autopsy guy is like, this thing usually starts to present in water. Trauma in water, which is also why his last attack that killed him was when he was in the bathtub.
Yeah. And
so
he went under.
And again, we have another inverse. I'm going to bring it up every time it happens because my brain was broken by an English degree. So in this case, it's the inverse of the boy that she's trying to save, who has a fear of water. This person should be fearful of water, but instead embraces it and wants to be immersed of it and wants his dolls to be immersed in the water. So a person who should be scared of water isn't, and a person who shouldn't be scared of water is.
See, that's one symbolism I skipped over. I didn't even connect him to the child. I was just going forward into the parallel.
I like all the opposites.
I was going into the parallels.
One big one coming.
Yeah, between him and her.
Yeah.
And so we get Catherine. She wakes up in this dark tunnel chamber. It looks like a sewer system line.
Yeah, I got a lot of sewer system, and also like the labyrinth at the beginning of Labyrinth.
Yeah, a little bit.
With the very wet walls and the old stone.
She's got like this weird mesh bag on her head, and then like blood drops start falling on her, and like kind of splattering around.
Yeah, and
she wakes up and she starts exploring, and as she's exploring, you see this dog just drenched in blood in slow mo
next to a bathtub
of blood, shaking itself off, and she's just moving normal speed, but the dog is still shaking in super slow motion, getting blood all over the place. And so I'm like, what the fuck? And then that's when you notice the audio.
Yeah,
this is where I need to give props to the audio engineer for this film, because for the rest of the movie, in this dream sequence stuff, did it feel too real to you at parts? Because for me, personal experience, there will be times where I have dreams where you speak, but the audio sounds muffled. Like you're speaking your dreams, but it's just like
only when I'm also being forced to slow-mo, like when I'm running from a monster.
Oh yeah.
Like then my voice will be weird like that, because I'll be like, oh, but
it definitely made me feel that dream effect, that very dreamy, lost, echoey effect, where it kind of felt euphoric.
We can't say enough good things about all the visuals that are coming up. Like pretty much from here to the end of the movie, the visuals are just top notch. And again, even though a lot of them are CGI, like computer graphics, they hold up so well. And the realist effects that they did are just
oh my god,
off the chain good.
That was one of the next ones I wanted to talk about. So as she's exploring these,
she follows the dog.
Yeah, the leaky tunnel. She follows the dog, and the dog disappears.
Takes her into a museum of horses.
Oh no! She sees a doorway where there's a child running up a set of stairs, and she's on the opposite side across a little canyon.
Yeah,
but she somehow is able to cross it. I don't remember how, but she winds up walking into where the kid was. The kid runs up the stairs and goes through a doorway. She follows after the little kid, and when we find this little kid, he's petting a horse. He's petting a horse, and he's kind of trying to hide from her, and she like tries to be like, "Hi, are you Carl?"
She also pets the horse and starts talking with the kid. And she does what's the funny bit she does? She's like, oh yeah, I had a friend who also likes horses. Name is whatever the kid's name is Edward. The boy, not the horse.
Yeah.
And she gives a little smirk and he gives a little smile. And I'm like, all right, we're starting the process. Oh, I should mention earlier, J-Lo said that Catherine said that normally it takes months to get the kind of trust that she's going to need to get the location of this.
And they're like, how soon can you do it?
We need it today. And so she's running a deadline. So she's pushing a lot more than she would normally.
Yeah.
So she's talking to him. She's already trying to develop a repertoire with him. But then what happened happens to the horse?
So she's finally getting a little bit of a smirk at him. He's laughing a little bit, but then the clock strikes, and we see this old-timey style countdown clock that keeps striking, getting quicker and quicker. And she's like, talking like, no, it's fine. What are you worried about? Yeah. And he's just looking at the clock, looking at her, looking at the clock, looking at her, looking at, and then finally he pushes her out the way. And as he pushes her out the way, the clock strikes down into the red zone. And all of a sudden, these giant glass segmenters come down and slice the horse into bisections.
Yeah.
And the horse is still alive, dude. The muscles are still pumping.
Think the slicing scene from 13 Ghost in that glass house when the dude gets chopped in two. But this horse gets chopped in like 12.
Multiple segments. Yeah. All from glass section.
And then it's the coolest part is after they come down separate, they go into the horse and then they separate so that you can walk between them and see like
the
where the heart's
muscles
still beating.
Yeah.
And the horse is still snorting. Like it's fine? Question mark.
So unsettling,
but it's probably my favorite scene in the whole movie. Like, is just that whole horsing around scene to steal something from BoJack Horseman. That whole horsing around scene's great, and it's also great that that Carl already cares enough about her to save her. He pushes her out of the way of the blades,
and that's explained too. They explain that after she leaves. I'll talk about that here in a second. So. Once the sectioner happens, Carl runs off again.
Yeah.
And she follows him down, through another room. He disappears, but she's walking through a hallway with all these other chambers in it.
Yeah, I call this the sexy doll cathedral.
Yeah. Basically, in his mind, these are his prizes.
Victims.
These are his prizes.
Yeah, these are all the previous victims, each one made up as a different type of sex doll.
And so for her, as she's walking through his chamber of prizes, she hits a switch to turn on the lights so she can see all of them.
Yeah. Which, first of all, you're already making a mistake.
Yeah. When she hits that switch, she unleashes one of the big fucking scary pieces of this fucking nightmare sequence.
It's a bodybuilding lady.
Yeah.
For lack of a
muscle
better term.
mommy.
Yeah,
muscle mommy.
Yeah.
But it opens all the chambers, and you see these different versions of victims that have... he collects in his mind on how he sees them, how he remembers them. And it's funny that you mentioned the doll that was sitting in front of the mirror, because that doll was actually a victim that he had in one of the chambers.
Yeah.
He had a girl whose face was all cut up and mutilated and bleached face, and he had her tied down to a chair with a gagger in her mouth.
Yeah.
And she was looking at the mirror, twitching. Yeah. Then you had...
the one pushing the carriage.
Yeah, that was like a mom who was all like stitched together and her hands were stuck onto the carriage.
Yeah.
Then you had one that was in a dentist chair.
Mm-hmm.
You had another that was basically covered in clay that was standing next to wolves. Yeah. And when it opened up her eyes, it scared the shit out of Catherine. And this gave the muscle mommy victim...
time to...
Yeah, knock her
Drop
out.
the bionic elbow, R.I.P. Dusty Rhodes.
Mm-hmm.
Drop that bionic elbow on her, knock her out.
And you just see this really beautifully jacked woman. I'm not going to say that she was an attractive woman. The beautifully jacked woman who you didn't even get to see what she looked like as a victim.
No, you only get her from the neck down.
And you know what? I also had to wonder, if that's a victim, how the fuck did he knock her out?
Not chloroform. I feel like she could have fought him off.
If that was one of his victims, I'm like, holy shit.
That might not even be a victim. That might be like his representation of a threatening woman. Like, you don't know.
And he kept her chained up.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Could be. Or it could be one of his victims. Like, there's ways to beat muscle.
But this next scene... This was one that sticks with me to this day, and when I was a kid, I remember this was fucking epic. And it also creeped me the hell out.
Yeah.
Because of the body modification stuff. So, Muscle Mommy takes Catherine to...
a chamber.
Carl's throne room. Let's call it the throne room, because that's
one
exactly...
of them. That man's got a lot of throne rooms.
Yeah, I mean, multiple chambers in his head.
I mean, if you think you're the king, you need more than one throne room.
Sure.
This guy's got a lot of throne rooms.
So, he drops her at the foot of Carl's throne.
Yeah.
And so, Catherine starts waking up.
Yeah.
And as Catherine is waking up from being knocked out...
The walls are all purple silk.
Yeah, it's a purple, silky satin sheet.
Very classy. Very classy.
Large walls, large banners hanging against them.
Mm-hmm.
Bro, as soon as Carl stands up, you notice the banners are all connected to the rings in his back and his arms. So as he's walking down the steps, they're pulling along with him, and he's pulling the design of the room with him.
He's got this beautiful purple train behind him of what was all across the walls.
Yeah.
And he's walking towards her as she's looking the other way. Like, she doesn't see him yet.
Yeah, but she notices that the walls are moving,
and then turns back in time to get yelled at.
Yeah, when she turns around, she sees what Carl has embodied in his head, what he sees himself as now.
Yeah.
This Demon King-like figure. And he just yells, "Where did you come from?" And she screams, and she's terrified, because to her, that was too real. So she ejects herself and wakes up.
Yeah.
And it has very scary, side effects, because she almost was... She went hypothermic, almost.
Yeah, she's a little sick when she comes out of it.
She was freezing.
I mean, yeah, you're always tired when you come out, and you always need, like, a moment to get your head back on. Like, at the very beginning, they start reciting nursery rhyme. Again, another connection to our boy Carl. They start reciting the first line of a nursery rhyme, and she has to recite the next
to make
line
sure that she's okay,
because they're bringing her out.
Yeah,
and this time it's harder because she went out suddenly and out of fear.
Yep. Tell you what, though, I got real pissed off at this. Like, so she exited, and you know what? Typical fucking government agent is like, what's she doing? What's she doing? She needs to go back in. We're on a time crunch.
I need to talk to her. And they're like, you got to let her rest. Look at her. And he's like, what if instead of that, I sneak into her room and fucking, like, bully her some more?
Tell her a sad story.
Yeah, tell her the sad Peter Novak story about Charles Gish. And this is where they almost address in these kind of stories, you have the question of responsibility. How much is nurture versus nature? And it is rare that a movie takes a side on it, because I feel like the most fair opinion is it's a little bit of column A, a little bit of column B. But this is kind of the fight between J-Lo and
Vince Vaughn's character has a definitive thought on it.
Yeah, he's like, these people are going to be bad eggs no matter what. Like, the best thing you can do is put a bullet in them and be done with it. And she's like, well, what about their childhood? What about the causes?
And he says straight up, he's like, I don't believe that just because you experience that kind of trauma and abuse that anyone should ever become a killer.
He says it very definitively, which leads you to believe that he had a bad childhood.
Yeah, that he became a good guy in his mind.
Yeah.
He became a good guy hunting the bad guys, because he's like, look, I went through the same thing and I didn't become a killer.
Right.
You did become a killer, but with a badge and a gun to legally kill.
Yeah. And also, it doesn't... Here's the thing that I feel like people that give that argument never think of. It doesn't really matter if you did, because everyone's chemical brain soup is different. So it doesn't matter, because you might had just a little bit more testosterone, or a little bit more estrogen, or the chemicals that caused your violent behavior might have been just toned down this much less than the person that goes out and does something horrible.
Or in Carl's case, he has a fucking schizophrenic degenerative disorder. You don't want to
accept that randomness, because that takes away your... I struggled really hard to get where I am, and it doesn't, man. Like, you still fought hard to get where you are, but you can admit that there was some luck involved. That you just happen to have a chemical cocktail that doesn't leave you so depressed that you can't get out of bed some days, or that doesn't make you a serial killer, or whatever else. Vince Vaughn's character Peter Novak wants nothing to do with that. He wants
he'll hear none of it.
He wants a black and white world.
Yeah.
Because he's a cop and it makes his life easier to have a black and white world. J-Lo, of course, Catherine Dean, wants shades of gray, because she's been inside these people's minds.
She shows the empathy.
She knows.
She understands.
Yeah, she knows that the empathy is not only necessary, but once you've seen these people on inside their heads, you understand, hey, empathy's not a bad thing. These people were once kids, and someone came along a lot of times and fucked their shit up. And the reason they are what they are now has a lot to do with shitty parents. So you want to put that gun on somebody, maybe you need to find their mom and dad. Just saying.
And after, now that we have this already, high stakes thing going into it, trying to find this girl, we get a scene shown where Julia is in the chamber, and now water is starting to fill up. Yeah. It's on a timer.
Yeah.
And it's ever since that fucking TV got cut on. If they never would have flipped that switch, she would still be alive.
Possibly.
She would be in the dark, but she wouldn't be getting flooded. Yeah. It only turned on once they flipped it on.
Yeah.
So that's
well, I was wondering, because it may have just turned on the lights. So a worst case scenario is she would have just drowned in the dark, because like we don't know if that turned on everything or just put the lights on. I think it's almost funnier that, like, if they had never turned on the TV, everything would have happened just the same, but she just would have been in the dark the whole time. That would have sucked so much worse.
I would like to believe that it was their fault directly.
That's fair.
From the visuals,
I think there's evidence of that.
Yeah, the visuals correlate to as a direct...
There's definitely evidence of that.
You know, you flip switch, the machine turns on in the cell.
Yeah, but much more important than all that is Valentine's back. We get our dog back.
Yep. They bring the doggy in to try and help relax Starger when he's in his comatose state by licking his hand.
The more comfortable Carl is, the more malleable his mind will be.
It'd be easier to reach his softer side.
J-Lo. Catherine even says that you might have left the hoops in his back. Because that also might have added to his comfort.
Because he likes the comfort of suspension. He likes the feeling of weightlessness.
Yeah.
And the one thing I did want to bring up, when they were discussing Catherine entering his mind, they basically straight up told her, like, oh, you reached the center of her mind. Catherine reached the center of his mind way sooner than most people should be able to.
Yeah.
Like, that's why she was in the darkest part right away.
Yeah.
It's because somehow his younger self, the innocent side of him,
guided her.
Yeah, like, trusted her so quickly. The innocent side wanted that help, and it led her straight to the darkest part.
She's got away with kids.
But that's something that also hadn't been done before. Like, wow, you found the control center of his darkness.
Yeah.
You were in it. You shouldn't have been able to do that.
Yeah.
So that's actually another thing that I was like, wow, no wonder why it was so fucking intense.
She's got skill. Yeah.
She went from 0 to 100 really quick.
Yeah. So it's time for her to go back in, and this time we get more of an Alice in Wonderland feel because she changes sizes a bunch.
Yeah, this tripped me out a little bit. This tripped me out in the sense because you see it, everything's going normal, and then a quote-unquote power outage happens.
Yeah.
And she has to get up.
This was some Nightmare on Elm Street shit, where you think you're awake, but you're still in the dream.
So she gets up, and she's groggy, and she's like, all right, I gotta go do it. And she goes to go do it.
And she's walking towards it. It's getting taller.
Yeah, she's getting smaller and smaller and smaller.
Yeah.
And she looks back, and she's still on the table, and she says, I'm already in.
Yeah.
And that's when you finally realize, oh, shit. Something is not right here.
Yeah.
That's because the power of fucking Carl's mind is so strong and so dark. It was easily able to intercept her and control her. Right, like now that he's had her in
the cage,
in his mind one time, he immediately was able to control her coming back.
Yeah,
and this was a pretty cool scene. She gets sucked into the cage. It did have a very Alice in Wonderland vibe to it.
Yeah,
but I like how when she fell out, she's floating upwards.
Oh,
like she's hanging upside down.
These effects are amazing.
Yeah, and then the whole time she's in this flowing red dress, like she's underwater. Mm-hmm. But she's just out in open air.
Yeah,
and her hair is moving like she's underwater and
beautiful,
floating around.
Beautiful scene.
And thankfully, having Valentine there did bring enough comfort because Valentine was in Carl's mind as the guide
and as the real Valentine, not the black doll covered in blood.
The sweet one.
Yeah, the good one. Yeah. And for that, Carl takes her back to a more, quote-unquote, innocent time when he's a child. And you get to see some of the horrible abuses that he obtained while being a child. I
like how when she follows Valentine through the door, it's this big, grandiose door. But when she comes out of it, she's wearing normal street clothes and coming out of a pantry door. I like that. Yeah. I like how...
And when she gets shoved back into the pantry, it's a pantry.
Yeah.
Like it's no longer leads to that different place.
And this is where we get to see...
some of what made Carl.
Yeah. And not only that, you see multiple things because it's a different sequence every time she peers out. So the initial one, she comes up to Carl and lets him know, hey, you ran away from me last time, I came back, everything's going to be okay, you want me to help you with the dishes? Hey, also, here's a little amulet for you to shine. If you ever get lost in here and you can't find me, but I'm here, shine this and I'll find you.
She also, the other boy, and Edward had one as well.
Yeah.
Because we see, so it's a kind of a star-shaped emblem that you can use to reflect light to her, and she'll see it because it's connected to her because she gave it to him.
And when she's doing all this discussing and giving it to him, he smiles and he's like, "Oh my God, the comfort!"
Someone gave me something that wasn't a slap in the face.
And immediately, when he has this happy clarity moment with this woman in his mind, the plate that he was cleaning breaks,
Yeah, he was
and it
doing
leads
dishes.
to a memory of his father beating his ass as a child. So he pushes Catherine into a pantry closet.
Once again, protecting her from the dangers of his mind.
Yeah, and that speaks volumes about
Little Carl loves Catherine. Like I think it's safe to use the L word at this point because again, no adult has shown him kindness. We will see through these flashbacks from the preacher that baptized him to his fucking sick ass dad.
Yeah.
Like
even
no one has shown his kindness. And so his dad comes in and beats the shit out of him.
And there was weird stuff that happened too. So she gets pushed into the pantry closet. She's watching through the slats of him, yell at him for breaking the plate and then start punching him and slapping him and break another plate in front of him. Then it cuts to Catherine looking around inside the pantry and she notices that the pantry's kind of shifting.
Yeah.
She looked down and her feet is in a bowl full of eels, electric eels. She's just standing in a fucking water tin full of eels.
Yeah.
So unsettling. I thought they were snakes at first, but then I saw they're eels. It doesn't make it much better.
Maybe worse. If they're electric eels, maybe much worse. I like, though, here's the thing, and this is maybe, once again, me reading too much into it, but you can look at that as Carl threatening her. I prefer to think of it as Carl, I almost said Carl Jr., the hamburger joint, as Carl trying to keep her still. Like, don't move. I don't want my dad to find you. And because he's half little Carl and half big scary Carl, he's like, how can I keep her from moving? Oh, I'll put some scary eels at her feet so she stands still.
She looks away, and there's 3 different scenes that show up. So we have the first one where the plate is broken and his dad goes off on him and is cussing him out, going off. She looks away, she sees the bowl full of eels. She looks up out the slats again, and you see him getting abused in front of his mother, with his mother.
Yeah.
And so his mom had to go through that shit too. And then you see that his mom suffered at the hands of his father.
Yeah.
Then she looks away again, and you see that the closet is changing behind her and it's turning into a doorway.
Yeah.
She looks out one more time, and you see Carl playing with dolls. And this right
here, the iron scene with some content warning, some F-bombs dropped by his father.
Carl is playing with dolls, and he's genuinely enjoying himself. He's having a good time, and his father sees this, chases him around. He's like, playing with fucking dolls again, you little F word.
Yeah.
And he's like, I'll show you, and starts beating him with his bare fist.
I will not raise a F word over and over again while beating him with his fist, and then finding a woman's tool,
an iron,
clothing
and
iron.
Burns the. You don't see the burn, but you hear the anguish.
And this is actually, in my opinion, J-Lo's best acting, because she's watching through the slits and she's crying and she's got her hand over her mouth to keep herself from screaming or intervening, I suppose. And I felt her anguish of watching this child suffering and not being able to do anything about it. It was heartbreaking.
And now,
it really was.
And right before that scene, when I was discussing about how you saw a scene with the father beating him up in front of his mom, the father also makes some comments towards the mom saying, well, don't listen to anything she says. She's a fucking liar. This whore, all she does is lie. She's, I ain't gonna listen to anything this bitch says. Just keeps going on this fucking tirade, misogynistic.
Legacies of abuse? Not in this household.
So after the iron scene of him getting burned, and yes, I will say that is J-Lo's best scene of her believably selling to seeing it. She was
heartbreak.
generally destroyed.
Yeah.
She turns around and walks to the door, and you see grown-up Carl with his first kill.
Yep.
And this is grown-up Carl's first interaction with Catherine in his mind.
This is adult Carl's first interaction. Where he's not real adult Carl, not the god.
The one that was wound up arrested. Yeah. The human version of himself.
Yeah, there's kind of 3 Carls running around here.
And this is a memory. This is the memory of his first kill, his first victim. Mm-hmm. So we see him basically wearing rubber gloves, smoking a cigarette, and he's got this victim in a bathtub full of blood everywhere, and he just, while smoking, nonchalantly asks Catherine why she's here.
Yeah.
And when she tries to explain that, I'm here to help you, Carl, he starts twitching and being like, liar, bitch, whore. Yeah. And those were the things that his father had said to his mother.
Drops the truth bomb on him. She says, you sound like your father.
And that sets him off.
Yeah. Because he is... First she does ask him, when did this like, he does the twitch, and she's like, when did that start happening? And then he mentions the baptism.
Yeah.
And I was like, I knew baptism released demons in people. I always figured, but now I got proof, undeniable proof. And then he goes off, and then she says, you sound like your father, and then he goes off. And this is when we get Pan, I would say, the goat rapist god of Greek mythology. And kind of the dark side of, when you were a kid, if you read Greek or Roman myths, it was always like, oh, and the little goat Pans, he would chase the nymphs around in the forest, and they would always giggle and run away from him. Like, this is the dark side of that. This is what happens when he catches one. He rapes them. Yeah, and so, this is what Goat Pan Carl is doing to J-Lo.
But before he showed up, I do want to kind of touch on the trauma that he discusses.
Oh, please.
So, when that demon voice comes out and she wants to figure out why this is happening to him, and we discover that, yeah, it was a forced baptism like we saw in the transition into his mind.
Yeah.
Carl straight up was saying that he drowned while nobody helped him, and all he could hear was the sound of his father. That's all he could hear was the sound of his father saying the prayer over again, and he started having a seizure. He's drowning in the water, being held down, and no one would help him.
And when my father took me home that night, he broke 3 of my ribs.
The only voice that helped him was him. And you never know who him is. It's the voice of whatever is possessing him that makes him this like demonic entity in his own mind.
Yeah.
That's the only voice that saved him. But yeah, I wanted to talk about how on that night, my father took me home, broke 3 of my ribs, and fractured my jaw. I was only 6 years old.
Yeah.
Now, I want to go back to Novak's discussion of saying kids who endured physical abuse and trauma, that's no excuse for them to become killers.
Now, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, Carl.
And I have to reiterate, that stance, ACAB. I'm not going to justify the murders. I'm not going to say... Yeah. I'm going to say, bro, this did cause a direct correlation to what broke his psyche.
Yeah. This does not mean... Yeah, exactly what you're saying. This does not mean that we think he should be allowed to keep killing because, he had a bad childhood. But try and fucking understand... part of the process is understanding what creates people like this and trying to help children before they become people like this. If you hear this entire story from start to finish and the only thing you take away from it is, oh, I hope Carl gets the chair, and at no point are you like, maybe we should take steps to make sure that other children don't go through what Carl went through, then you're taking the wrong fucking lesson.
And that's where Catherine tries to reaffirm him. Catherine tries to reassure him. She's like, you didn't deserve any of that.
No. And not everyone is like that.
No one deserved that. There is a world out there for you, Carl, where you could have been protected and loved.
Yeah.
You can help. You could have been helped. You deserved to have been saved. And I'm sorry that no one did. And this for me, that's not what Carl wanted to hear. So if you watch very closely, after she gives him this heartfelt speech of trying to empathize and be like, you didn't deserve that, Carl gets angry and he said, that world doesn't exist.
Yeah.
That world that you believe out there, I don't see it.
No, I've never encountered that.
And that's when we get this really cool visual of
where
him
he goes in the corner,
going into the shadows, kind of and the camera is on him in the shadows the whole time.
Sort of a Blair Witch Project of the dude standing in the corner.
She's watching him the whole time. You never see him leave, but once the camera is focused directly on Catherine's back shot and him being directly in the shadows around her, all of a sudden, bam, that's when this pagan, pan-looking god version of himself...
This is such a good...
It was so cool.
He changes appearances a lot in this. 4 times. But this is probably my favorite.
I don't know, the King one is pretty fucking awesome to me.
The King in Yellow is good. And it's... But his face was too old. This one I like the best because... number 1, I'm a sucker for mythology. And number 2... There is that dark side of mythology. There's so much rape in it. Yeah. Zeus used to turn into all sorts of animals and just go around raping folks. So it was again, it was kind of it's a fairy tale, but it's the darkness that it resides within fairy tales, which of course would be attractive to someone with Carl's mindset because he is a child who was forced to grow up way too fast.
And you know what? She's never gonna fucking listen to this podcast episode, anyways. I love her dearly, but my fiance, I warned her ahead of time. I was like, "Yeah, this movie gets a little sexy at times, so just a heads up."
Yeah.
And it got to this part, and she put her phone down, and she's like, "Oh, okay." You're right.
If you're into that kind of thing, here's that kind of thing.
Yeah, and she's like, okay, I can see why you were trying to let me know. And she's like, that is very hot. And I'm like, yeah, I fucking know you.
Yeah.
And so it becomes very sexual in nature in the way that he kidnaps her.
Yeah.
You know, it's very hard to describe his hairdo choice, because he has that 90s hairdo where his whole head is shaved except for 2 really long locks in the front.
Yeah.
And they're like done up into these like hanging down horns.
Yeah.
And he's got like white asbestos all over his fucking head.
Yeah. Which is funny because it makes him look like his dolls, kind of.
He's essentially like air gliding, humping over her while he's got her down on the ground, and then he sexually puts on one of those fucking sex collars on her.
And at that point, she forgets she's in a dream.
And it becomes too real, and they've lost her into his mind.
Now they've got to figure out how to get her back. And this is where Peter gets a couple points back, because he volunteers to go in after.
No training whatsoever. He's like, fuck it, I'll go in. You know, guns a-blazing. Well, no real guns a-blazing. You know, metaphorically.
Ugly yellow mustard shirt a-blazing.
Yeah.
Here's the thing. This is something I wanted to ask. Who controls the clothes you wear? Because Peter?
You can dream something better.
Yeah, dream. You live in dream. Dream something better than casual Friday at work. Like, you could do better, my friend. But yeah, Peter ends up, and I like that his trip in is different from hers in that it's just a bunch of like lightning and like it looks more like a psychedelic music video because he's not as in touch with her as she is. When she went in, she saw the dolls, she saw the blood, she saw she saw things that meant a lot to Carl. But Peter has no connection to Carl and thinks very lowly of Carl. So he just gets the basic. It's like he's being let into the servants' entrance of the mansion, whereas Catherine was let in through the front door. It's like royalty. But I love where he lands.
Oh, my God.
Reminded me of Hell and What Dreams May Come very much. When Robin Williams is stepping over all the people buried in the sand.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's the 3 women, which, I don't know if you got this.
They were like turkey vultures just staring up at the sky waiting to fucking drown.
But then they would look and say something. But do you know what they were?
His mom.
Yeah, the 3 aspects of his mother. There was, I quote, the first one says, "Have you seen my child?" That is the mother.
His father took him.
Yeah, his father's taken him. That's the mother that loved him. Then there's, "I spit him out of my body, no big deal." That is the indifference. Yeah. That is neither love nor hate. And then the third...
What's it matter? That child is evil. My child has no soul.
My child is an abomination. Yeah. That's the hate.
Mm-hmm.
So he can't view his mom as just one of these things. She is all 3 of these things.
Yep.
Love, hate, indifference. There were times he was getting beat and she didn't seem to give a fuck. There's times when she seemed to love him. And it's hard because he doesn't know how to feel about his mother. So it's represented by these... And I thought that was fucking chef's kiss beautiful.
That was very poetic, very cool symbolism.
And in a barren field where nothing is growing. Come on. Yeah. Oh, every fucking psychology major creamed their pants watching that scene. Man or woman.
I also love how before Novak goes in to Carl's mind, they once again remind you in the movie, they have to remind you, we have a sense of urgency here. Here's Julia in the tank, and the water is even higher now.
Yeah.
So we're getting on a crunch time here. She's gonna drown. Yeah. We have to keep reminding you.
Although, at this point, she's getting proactive. She's up there messing with the pipes.
Yeah, she won't be a victim.
Will come into play
she won't
later.
be a victim.
Yeah,
she refuses to be a victim.
And I like her.
Yeah,
I like her. She's feisty.
Yeah.
But
I thought that was really cool that they did show that. They're like, she's going to be a different victim.
Yeah,
you know. But you do have to be reminded by the directors, like, hey, sense of urgency. Yes, we're doing all this creepy shit in his mind now, but there's still an outside factor that we're trying to raise towards.
In danger.
Yeah. And so that basically gives you a little bit more of adrenaline rush to be like, okay, they need to hurry up and get this done, because now you have 2 things happening at once. She's drowning while they're in his mind.
And J-Lo's dying inside the mind. Yeah. So we got to get her out of there.
Everything's higher stakes now.
Yeah.
And I like that they remind you every single time that they leave his brain, the stakes are still high. The stakes are getting higher. The stakes are getting higher. And that... The whole trippy psychedelic entrance with the blood trickling down into the water and then making this whole like kaleidoscope effect. It's so cool.
So good.
The fucking
all their work with liquids and water were pretty great.
And going back to the beacon of light that Catherine had given a young Carl before, Novak starts getting a light shining in his face, trying to guide him.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you saw it. I didn't see it. per se, but I didn't see who was guiding him. Was that young Carl who was leading him to Catherine? Because Catherine was under a spell.
I think...
come to find out.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but doesn't he not go that direction? Because here's the thing. The beacon of light comes up, and instead of going in the direction it's coming from, he looks to where it's pointing and goes in that direction. So here was my
Which
take.
it sends him to a doorway.
Yeah, my take was that Carl was trying to get J-Lo's attention,
Okay.
and he just saw it. But instead of... Because he didn't know what it was. He wasn't like, oh, I should go towards the light. He was like, oh, is the light pointing to something? And it turns out it was. It was pointing to this really pretty chandelier room.
Yeah. Bro,
with the nicest, biggest chandelier I've ever seen, and J-Lo dressed to impress.
Goddamn. Like, so when he goes into that doorway, it looks like a little hut from the outside, but when you go inside, it's this like palace-looking place.
Yeah.
And you have Catherine, who has now been basically entranced and possessed, and she's wearing the collar.
Yeah.
That's how you know that he has a chokehold,
and a very
metaphorical chokehold on
Yeah.
her, and has a slave mask as well as this really sexy gothic like armor dress.
Yeah.
And it's made her. She's also chained up to the bed, so she, in his mind, is now a sex slave to him.
Yeah.
Very Jabba the Hutt.
And she
Princess
very
Leia vibes.
seductively
Tries to seduce Novak.
Well, distracts Novak, so that I think it was all about because there's a scene where they're kissing, and you see her looking over his shoulder, like got him, boss.
Yep.
And what happened is
He shows up in this crazy.
This is the King in Yellow.
Yep.
Not Lovecraft, but the King in Yellow, whose play is mentioned in Lovecraft and in other works, the play that's supposed to make you crazy.
Yeah.
This is the representation, I think, of the King in Yellow.
And he puts this red velvet bag over Novak's head and chokes him out until he passes out. And
like you do.
When he
gives him the Braveheart treatment.
and the cool part, I want to go back to the audio.
Yeah,
because while this is happening, more of this crazy echoing, faintly able to hear kind of audio really ramps up and adds to that dream sequence effect, where it kind of feels like you're coming down off of drugs, like a morphine effect, where everything is a little like, you know, you're losing a little bit of a lapse of time. Everything kind of seems slow motion. Mm-hmm. You're moving full motion, but everything sounds like it's in slow motion.
Yeah.
And when Carl pulls back, you see Novak on this table.
Yeah.
And it's old school medieval torture platform. Yeah. I've seen this thing in plenty of fucking movies.
I think most famous, though, was in Braveheart.
Yeah.
Because it's where Mel Gibson yells freedom as he's getting his intestines turned on the musical spit.
I forget what the actual name of the device is, but what he does is Carl cuts open... Again, this is all in a dream, but Novak can feel every bit of it.
Yeah.
Because it's becoming real to him.
Yeah.
It's becoming real. Even though he tells himself several times, it's not real, he kind of loses his grip on what's real and what's not.
Yeah.
Because he's screaming and feeling the pain of it. And they're seeing it in his neurological signs when they cut away to the team.
Oh,
watching
he's actually
his
feeling that pain. That's
they're like
sign.
something's going on.
Yeah.
And because you see him kind of shaking on the table.
Yeah.
And so they're like, remember, if you die in your dream, you're going to die in real life. If you die in his mind, you're dead in real life.
Yeah.
And so you have Carl doing this... I don't know how to describe it, but very Joker-esque giggle, like hee, cutting the insides, finds the tiniest piece of intestine, loops it on the metal musical spit with thorns, and starts pulling the wheel so it slowly rotates the lower intestine out.
Getting those intestines out.
And I have to give props to Vincent D'Onofrio on this performance because it was so good, so creepy.
Yeah.
The visual aesthetic just added to it, and this whole time you just have J-Lo not breaking a fucking stare.
She's loving it.
She's just watching.
She's like, Daddy's doing good work over there. And Vince Vaughn starts yelling memories at her. He's trying to get Catherine
talk about her
to wake
trauma.
Up. Yeah, he's talking about Catherine's trauma to try and get her out of it, and so that she'll fucking help him, because while he's trying to wake her up, he's slowly succumbing as well. Mm-hmm. So he's like, I got to get her out before I succumb and I forget that I'm in a dream, and then this will kill me. So luckily, his gambit works, and the poor king in yellow is betrayed by his love.
Yeah, Catherine finally breaks out of it. Mm-hmm. She's reminded about the trauma of her brother dying when he was 6 years old.
Drama and trauma.
Yeah, the trauma of her brother dying when he was 6 years old, and that was the whole reason why she wanted to get into therapy and become a counselor to try and help people go through loss like she had gone through.
Yep.
And once that spell is broken, she grabs a metal spike and just stabs him in the back. Literally stabs him in the back through the shoulder blade, and he disappears, returning the room into a normal scene.
Yep.
Because Novak is now no longer being tortured, his insides are back in, there's no blood, he doesn't feel pain, and Catherine is back in normal clothes.
Yeah.
And it's funny that how abrupt that is.
But while Vince Vaughn was getting, if I remember correctly, while he was getting tortured on the table, he sees that symbol again, and he finally makes the connection.
No, it's after that. So it's after when he's free.
Yeah.
And I wrote, now that the torture is broken and Catherine is loose from the spell, the young version of Carl shows up once again and guides her through this room. And in that room, you see this giant, looks like a mystical box with a woman floating in it. Like a beautiful lady.
The current victim.
Yeah. Floating in it. And that's when she's like, hey, that's Julia. That's where she's at.
Yeah.
In his mind, he still has her trapped. That's how he sees all of them. As these floating angels.
Yeah.
And ironically enough, on the box the magical box she's trapped in, you see that symbol repeatedly. And that's when Novak's like, I've seen this before.
Yeah.
And he remembers that it's from that fucking operating table, the crane table that he had in his basement, where he would chain himself up and ejaculate over the corpses. And Demon Carl, once again, fucking shows up and he snatches up young Carl. Yeah. And it's so creepy the way that he does it.
This time he kind of is dressed like a mime. He's kind of gesturous.
Pennywise.
Yeah.
It reminded me of Pennywise the
Clown.
Clown.
New Pennywise, yeah.
He's like doing a handstand, and then out of the fucking dark, he cartwheels, and he's like,
grabs younger him, and Catherine tries to go after him, and Peter's like, no, we got what we came for. Touches her and his get out of the dream buttons, and wakes them both up. She's yelling the whole time, I'm going to come back for you. I'm not going to let you stay with that monster, blah, 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 blah. So she's still trying to save Carl, the person.
Yep.
Whereas, of course, Peter's trying to save the victim of Carl. Because, again, they've diverged on their paths.
Two separate goals. Yes. Like, she cares about trying to save what's left of his humanity.
Both important. Because Peter is... he's on the right track.
And once he wakes up, he's like, okay, now I remember. Dude, first thing he does is a typical police mode, gets out of the fucking chamber, decides, hey,
staggers to phone.
Calls Agent Cole and tells him, go in the basement, look for that machine, that symbol that's on it. What's the name of that company? They find the company, and they wind up being able to do what the FBI does, and they track down everyone who sold that machine, or had that machine sold to them. And so that's his break. That's what he needed. He got what he needed out of the dream to find her in real life.
Yeah.
But this is where Catherine, the hero empath, goes into overdrive, and she breaks all the rules.
Yeah.
She locks everyone out of the room. She goes back under,
and
resets
of course,
the code.
She's going to do the thing we talked about at the very beginning and bring Carl into her mind instead of going into Carl's mind, because Carl is way too powerful there. So let's bring him to her playground and save that boy.
But before she reverses the feeds, she needs to bring something into her own mind to think about. She visions a patron saint.
Yeah.
I forget the
it's a tarot card.
It's a tarot card? I thought it was a patron saint. That was in the Bible.
Yes, it is. It is a tarot card. Or
the priestess?
It's not the high priestess. I'm not sure which tarot card it was, but the reason I know it's a tarot card is because it's got a peacock on it, and the peacock is a fucking in the world of tarot, it means beauty, wholeness, watchfulness, confidence, and its counter of the peacock. Can you guess what animal? The snake. The snake, which means darkness, evil, and fear. Yeah. But can also, if it's, how if a tarot card's upside down, it can mean the opposite. Yeah. Can also mean renewal, like as a snake sheds its skin to become something else. So it's not a coincidence that in the final battle she's surrounded by peacocks and he comes in the form of a snake.
Yeah.
Yeah. But anyway, sorry, as you were.
No, it was something that she was going to.
That was the last, also, of those three, like them being polar opposites of each other and being in conflict in that way.
Yeah, I was going to say it was basically like the holy versus the unholy.
Yeah,
in this final sequence,
the confidence versus the fear, the darkness versus the watchfulness and the light. And
so when she reverses speed, she lets young Carl into her mind, and he easily finds her in this oasis that's in the desert of her mind.
Yep.
She appears as this saint-like figure, and it's basically meant to convey this warmth and comfort to reassure him that he's safe.
Yeah.
And young Carl straight up says he wants to stay in her mind with her.
Yeah.
But she lets him know that can't happen. And I don't know if you got this, when he gets slightly upset with her, he ages up.
Yeah.
Like the real him comes out.
Yeah.
And he basically,
kind of is like, it doesn't matter anyway, he found me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, you know what? And it's sort of like that protective coating that children give themselves, where they're like, oh, it doesn't matter if I could have been happy anyway, because I actually can't. Like, so I'm going to go ahead and cut that off before anyone else can, because it hurts less if I take that happiness away from myself before you can. So she's like, oh, you can't actually stay here. And he's like, it wouldn't have mattered anyway. He's here. It's all over. Like, that's a very childlike reaction to disappointment.
Yeah, I was like, the way he handled the rejection of it is like he went from being innocent to being the slightly corrupted version of his older self back to being a kid once the actual dark of him found its way in. Mm-hmm. And I love that sequence of introducing the final form of Carl's dark demonic persona. Mm-hmm. He floats up out of the pond in the oasis, and you just see like this like scaly wing-like thing slithering through the water coming up, and
motherfucking snakes.
Yeah, it exits out of the water.
Why is there gotta be motherfucking snakes on this motherfucking plane?
And he sheds his fucking skin.
And also there's a little like fountain in the center of this oasis, and it fills with snakes too that are swimming around.
Yep.
Oh, it's good. It's good shit.
And so when he gets up and he stretches out, he starts spinning around and like running and hiding behind the trees, and he's casting shadows. And now the final battle has begun. And in her mind, she becomes this badass warrior nun. Straight up, she's wearing a nun's habit. Mm-hmm. She becomes a warrior nun, and she has a golden crossbow. She winds up fighting with him, and she shoots him in the foot, pinning him down. And I don't know if you noticed the symbolism, but when she shoots his foot down and he's stuck to the ground, she then shoots both of his hands down in the crucifix position.
Yep.
And she has him down.
Also, the position that he used to have while suspended above his victims.
Yeah. So when he's on the crucifix, this is a hard part to watch. She grabbed the chest bar that was attached to his body, which connected to his nipple rings. It was this giant bullhorn bar.
Yeah.
Like you see on the front of a fucking limousine. And it was attached to his nipple rings, and she just pulled that shit up and ripped it right off. So both of his nipples...
Speaking of things we see a lot in movies, is people getting their body piercings taken out.
And so she starts just repeatedly punching his face in and beating him
to a pulp.
And you see, once she pulls back, that the demonic version is this serpent-like demon creature.
He's also been reduced to like almost a caveman in that he's still trying to talk to her, but his words are very like, he doesn't say like, I have the boy. He'll say, have boy. Like, he's not forming, like he's becoming even more bestial, more demonic, less human as she visits violence upon him.
And the crazy part is when she's doing this, she finally gets done beating him up, and she pulls out a sword. Mm-hmm. And she's getting ready to strike him down. A la the scene of Michael striking down Gabriel. You know that famous painting?
Yep.
Where Michael's pinning him down, about to spear him through. It's very symbolistic of that from religious paintings.
A lot of religious iconic.
And what stands out to me on this one is that when she's getting ready to bring the sword down on him, the demon in his caveman voice, it's not real. Yeah. You can't kill me.
Yeah.
And then looks over and makes her change her attention to see young Carl is just as fucked up as the demon Carl.
Yeah.
That, if you're going to kill him, you have to kill young Carl.
And he says something like, I have the boy, or you lost the boy, or something about the boy in his cave talk. Like, it's hard to hear because not only is he talking in a weird guttural caveman voice, but his mouth's filled with blood because of the beating.
He said, you can't kill me, but you'll kill him. Yeah, that's what he said.
You'll kill the boy.
Yeah, you'll kill the boy.
Yeah.
And it distracts Catherine long enough to just leave him and find young Carl, who has the same wounds. And she lays him down in the water, just like his baptism.
Yep. But this time, Carl thanks her, and it's heartbreaking.
Yep. Yeah, it is very sad because the thing that caused the demon to be unleashed is the only thing that's releasing him finally.
Yeah.
So she drowns him in her mind, which kills him in his body.
Yeah.
Which was one of the side effects they were warned about.
Yep. If you die
no.
in dreams, you die in real life. Especially if you're in someone else's mind and they're completely controlling. Like, it's exactly what happened to her. Carl thinks this is real now.
And the symbolism of that is while this is happening, Novak has found the location. He's got the FBI surrounding the building where they found out that Novak worked for to seal up. And that's why he's been using this, because he was contracted to seal it up.
Yep.
And he finally finds the chamber. And, like you had said, Julia was a smart cookie. Yep. She wound up finding the air ventilation pipe.
Gave herself a little breathing tube.
Yeah, and had a breathing tube. So even if she was stuck under that water, she had a ventilation.
Filled all the way up, but you see her, like, sucking on this pipe.
Getting the fresh air.
Her light depends on it.
Because it was the tube that was giving her fresh air from outside.
Yep.
And that was actually how we found her, is because the vent kept opening up.
Yep.
It kept opening up, and he's like, where does this go to? Finds the underground hatch. Starts trying to shoot out the chamber.
Yeah.
Bullets don't quite work. So right as he's about to smash it, I love the symbolism.
Mm-hmm.
Right as Carl is finished being baptized, drowned in Catherine's mind, right as he dies, the glass shatters.
Her baptism is released.
Yes.
As his is complete.
Yes. Yeah. I love the duality of that.
Yeah.
That whole duality was very, very cool visually.
Mm-hmm.
I liked it. It was sad because you're not supposed to feel for this monster, and you have to...
I think you are, though. Because of the child.
But that's why they presented what Novak stance versus Catherine stance. Because you're either going to fall on one of two lines. And that's why the movie presented those two halves of the coin.
Yeah, absolutely.
And for me, it's like, fuck him for killing all those people the way he did, killing all those women the way he did. At the same time, it's like, shit, when you see the younger version of himself who is just a helpless child, you just feel. You feel because it's like,
if they'd got to him earlier, was there any sort of redemption arc for him? Because by the time Catherine gets to him, you just gotta drown him. Like, he even thanks her for it. Like, he's too far gone. But
no,
if he got put in a caring home at 12, if he got put in a caring home at 6, after his father fucking broke 3 of his ribs the first time, of what I assume was many times,
and his fucking jaw, like,
if someone had taken him out of the household, then what could Carl have been? What would have happened? We'll never know.
Yeah, that's the sad part, and it's
although we do get a bit of a redemption arc, because it does end with her. With Edward in her mind, like trying to keep Edward from turning into a Carl, because he's in a coma, he's never going to wake up and start killing people, but trying to give him a better quality of life through his trauma. So, quote unquote, happy ending.
So now that we have Novak is freed, Julia, Catherine has ended Carl, and he has officially died.
Yep.
We now see the FBI still investigating Carl's house, and they've ripped up the floorboards.
Yeah.
And when they're searching the floors of Carl's house, they find more disturbing evidence of his plans of how he had created the machine to operate, more torture device stuff, as well as you see the painting of the torture wheel that Novak was subjected to in Carl's mind.
Yeah.
And it kind of... They show you how... Just for a second, Novak is a little jarred. He's looking at it kind of like, oh, fuck, I remember that happening.
Yeah, right?
And he's a little off-putted by it. But then, they tell him, oh, hey, that chick is outside. Isn't that kind of weird?
Yeah.
So, like, she's keeping his dog that tracks.
Yeah. Like,
and it made me think a little bit. I was like...
Well, she's all about redemption. So, redeem the dog.
I'm going to go a little further here.
Okay.
What if a piece of Carl is stuck in her mind forever? He died inside her mind.
Huh.
What of a piece of her, of him, is stuck inside her? I know that's just a theory. There's nothing...
They did a Cell 2 where she's a serial killer?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, and you find out that part of it is from, like, a remnant of him hiding inside of her all these years.
Let's be honest, I'd watch it.
Same.
Yeah.
Same. I would watch it.
Oh, yeah.
And it was something that I thought about that was a fun theory.
That is a good theory. I didn't think of that, but
because I was like, why the fuck would she keep his dog?
Yeah. I just assumed it's because she's all about redemption. Like, the dog doesn't deserve to be put down
which is
because
true.
of the behavior of its owner.
I mean, the doggy did help kill 12 women.
But by laying down, like, police dogs can't be given to just anybody because their training makes them hyper vigilant and hyper violent. Like, you have to have special training to take a police dog when it retires or be a police officer. This dog was trained to lie down on command. Pretty much 30% of all dogs in the world have that order, know how to play dead. So it's probably nothing bad will come of this.
True.
Yeah.
But if they did decide to make a sequel, and for some reason JLo wanted to come back and do a sequel to redeem herself, I give permission to steal my idea.
Yeah,
just because it's a good
great.
jumping off point.
It's fucking great.
It's a good jumping off point to be like, well, why did 23 years later it all of a sudden start to fuck with her? Oh. Well, she's gotten older now, and maybe her mind's starting to go.
Yeah.
Maybe she's got dementia and it's kicking in to let free the demon.
He's getting stronger while she's getting weaker.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So that'd be cool. Hey, fucking Hollywood, pay me.
But man, the cell holds up.
Also,
I'm very happy.
Before, I want to talk about this weird ending. I feel like the ending...
the sailing ending?
No, this very last ending.
Okay.
This very last scene.
Yeah.
I feel like you could have ended it a little bit sooner. Now, I say it's weird the way that they ended it because... So, right before Edward's scene, they inserted the scene with her coming to check on Novak.
Mm-hmm.
Did you find that interaction with them very awkward? Because I did. So my issue with it is the fact that she's checking up on him. He's like, oh yeah, the FBI's got me written off saying that I was on a drug-fueled bender when I found Julia,
Yeah.
so they just want me to recover. And, it was just pure dumb luck, all that shit.
Yeah.
But they're like looking each other up and down, and it's like, is he gonna kiss her? Like, then they just give an awkward handshake.
I'm glad they don't because their worldviews are too different.
It was just
I like the idea though that they were like they thought about it for a second, and then they were like, no, I don't think so. I think we're too different. Like the way you view the world's very black and white, and like I don't think this would work. It's almost that's what I got from their little brief interaction was like they sort of thought about maybe trying it out, and they both kind of came to the same conclusion.
That's a possibility.
Yeah. That he was like, I don't want no bleeding heart liberal, and she was like, this guy's kind of an asshole, and they went their separate ways.
It was just that one little segment of that part that bugged me. Like, they could have ended it slightly differently.
Honestly, I would have left that scene out and just had someone mention that she's keeping the dog, because I do like that mention. But not have the whole scene.
Yeah, it's just like the
cut to her with the sailing.
The acting interaction just felt really weird.
Yeah, the end with her and Edward getting ready to go sailing.
That was perfect. That was fine. That was perfect. It went full circle and it ended where it began.
Yeah, that I liked. But yeah, I'm with you. I don't think I needed the scene. But besides that, or even with that, like this movie held up.
Yeah,
and I was worried. I was worried about J-Lo's acting. I was worried about the special effects, and none of my fears were founded. So
I was actually more impressed.
I'm very glad to have watched this.
I was more impressed now with the aesthetic, even more so than I was when I initially watched it. I was like, man, like as I've gotten older, this like visual effect aesthetic that they did for the dreams, just so cool, so simple, but so cool.
Yeah, let that dude do everything. Like those special effects need to come back because they look better than some 2023 special effects I've seen.
Dude, we've talked about this
much
before.
like in Dark City. Like some of the special effects, I was like, have we forgotten how to do this? Because this is great.
Yeah, like you and I have talked about this before. There's so many movies where I'm like, fuck, the CGI sucks, and it's like, why do we not just stick with practical effects?
Yeah,
like the
or
cool thing,
good CGI.
Yeah,
I'll accept good CGI. But here's the thing. They keep skimping on the CGI and how much they're paying them and how much they're overworking them. Part of the reason we're currently experiencing strike of pretty much every form of media entertainment, from the cartoonists to the actors to the writer. Like, everyone's on strike because Hollywood's treated them all like shit and not paid them enough. And that's why CGI suffered. That's why, like, plots have been more convoluted. Like, all of this is a direct result of capitalistic greed. Not to look at this through a leftist lens or anything, but like
we never do that.
It's a 1-to-1 ratio here.
We would never analyze a movie featuring a cop theme and analyze it with a leftist opinion on how these FBI agents handle it. We would never do that.
I'm insulted with us preaching, and I'm done. I don't even want to talk about it anymore.
But overall, I agree with you. This movie held up. there were aspects of it that were a little wonky for what it was, but I would say for me,
yep,
I give it a 4.8 out of 5.
That's a very high score, sir.
I give it a 4.8 out of 5.
I give the visuals a 15 out of 5. And I give the rest of it probably a 4.5 out of 5 or 4.0
That's fair.
out of
That's
5.
fair. And it's just little stuff that can.
Honest to God, like, you could just take the visuals from that movie and put it to a soundtrack of, like, really cool music, and, like, I'd like it almost as much as I liked it with all the rest of the stuff included. And, like, I understand you need a plot to drive this story, and the plot was good. Like I said, a 4 out of 5 is a fine rating, but, like, man, the special effects.
Yeah.
10 out of 9. Like,
that is one thing I did wish, and that's why I didn't give it the full 5, is just because, like, there's little things with the storytelling, and then I wish there was just a little bit more Dream World.
Yeah,
I just wish there was a little bit more Dream World.
A little less Vince Vaughn acting.
Yeah.
But hey, that's a great score and a great pick from you, Goreship. I'm very glad we watched it.
I'm glad that we got through this one. I was happy to check out an old nostalgic favorite for me, because sometimes when we pick these old movies that we remember from when we were kids, they might not always hold up in our heads like we thought they did.
I'm glad this one did.
Yeah.
Now,
what do you want to jump into? You want to talk?
Well, in a month, I'll go ahead and bring this up because I got this is a pick of mine followed by a pick of mine. So first we'll talk about next month. We are going to go into a once again, I'm all about hitting genres that we haven't hit before, but from angles that you don't expect. So we are finally going to touch on one of a writer many consider to be a master of horror. We're going to touch down with Stephen King in 30 days. And we are going to do a movie that is currently on Netflix called In the Tall Grass.
Love that movie.
It's so good, right?
Love that movie.
Yeah. So I want to talk. I watched it and I was like, ooh, I want to talk about this. So in 30 days, we are finally going to the realm of one Stephen King, and we are going to talk about his film In the Tall Grass, because once again, I like to come at things you expect, but not from the angle you expect. I know you were thinking The Shining, Cujo, Christine, whatever. No. In the Tall Grass in 30 days.
That is a great one.
Get your Netflix account for 1 month, watch it, and then delete it. Or get it through illegal means. I don't care. I'm not too bad. But that's in 30 days. In 30 seconds, we're going to talk about the short that I picked for this month.
What the fuck was this weird-ass thing you sent me?
It's
I
called
watched it.
Local 58 TV Weather Service. Only 2 minutes long.
It was super... You weren't lying when you told me that this was super short and sweet.
I picked a shorty.
And I watched it, and the entire time I'm watching it, I'm waiting for... I'm very confused, and I had an Adult Swim vibe to it.
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
And the
no relation, but yeah.
Yeah, it was just... I gotta ask, where the hell did you find this? What made you pick this?
Friend of the show, Zenitel, actually showed this to me not that long ago, but like months ago. And I immediately was like, oh, I want to do this for the show at some point. Because I like this because it shows what you can do. We've talked about this, and one of the reasons we started the shorts is to show what you can do with a limited budget, limited time.
Approach.
This person just used, what's the word I'm looking for? Free
emergency service warnings,
right? But I mean, stuff that everyone can
stock.
Use. Stock footage and free use music.
Yeah,
and made
royalty-free music, stock footage.
His name's Chris Straub. He's the writer, he's the editor, did all the things, and he just made this 2-minute thing with nothing but his own music and his own stock and like a little bit of video editing to change some of the words. And I fucking loved it. It addressed the horror of the failure of authority, which is one of my favorite horror vibes, where like authority's supposed to have the answers, but instead they just look at you and shrug, and you're on your own, kid. Sorry. Like every zombie movie where the government fucks it up completely, and we've all got to figure it out on our own. It does that. It's got such Cthulhu vibes of the fucking moon and the fucking like this weird beyond space thing. It is, for me, it was just, again, it's that sweet spot of the eerie horror where I had a feeling of unease after I finished it that I couldn't place, but I loved.
It was one of those things where when I was watching it, my fiance had asked, she's like, what the hell are you listening to? Is there an emergency warning going on right now?
Yeah, it's also very realistic.
Yeah, because...
Like, it's exactly how you would think.
Let's do a run through of this. All right, so we open with the... National Weather Service emergency alert.
Right. Well, before that, for just a brief second, you have... it is 12:15, and it shows the lineup of what's coming up next. It's at 12:15, we're having the public eye.
And then it cuts off.
At 1 o'clock, we have some other thing. At 2 a.m., we have the focus on faith. And then you have the weather warning beep that interrupts it.
Yeah.
And it says, this is a warning for a meteorological event. That's all it says. And it's like, oh, okay. And then another warning comes up, and it says, it's the moon. It says, during this meteorological event, please don't observe the moon with the naked eye.
Yep. And you're like, that's very odd.
And then then it ends, and it goes back to the but this I had to pause. It goes back to the future programming, and it says, 2:15, blood, and before it finishes writing it out, it cuts back.
I was trying to read that, and I paused it several times, and I was like, damn it, I can't stop it quick enough. Blood what? Blood what?
You have no idea. But 2 o'clock was supposed to be focused on faith. Now it's something to do with blood. And then it cuts to the emergency thing again. And it says, this is a danger alert correction. Which, this is your first idea that, they don't know what the fuck's going on either.
There's nothing wrong. Yeah. Go outside.
Well, no. First we have remain indoors. Do not look at the night sky. More info to follow. And then immediately after that, you get a view alert. The event is safe for all. The warning is lifted. Go outside now.
Yep. And it's like, all right, don't do it. Wait, do it.
And then it comes up and says, can you read this? Look at the moon. And you just keep these conflicting messages. Do go look at the moon. Don't go look at the moon.
Whatever you do not go outside. Do not look up.
And then all of a sudden, it's like... So for these emergency messages, a lot of times in the old days, someone had to just type them out in real time.
Yeah.
So you have someone at the machine typing out while slowly their brain's melting, it seems like. So they say, it's in the lights. The moon came into the mirror. It found me. Moonlit, white like eyes. No, not light, blood. I drown in him. If you are afraid, we will look together. And then it just shows the moon. And then you hear a scream, transmission ends.
Yeah.
And that's it. That's the whole fucking thing.
I was like, bruh.
And after it was over, I had goosebumps. My hair was standing up. And I was like, I picked this because, A, the feelings it gave me. But also, Chris Straub did so much with so little. Just some fucking public service.
It reminded me of VHS.
Some free, fun.
Have you ever seen ABC's of Death or VHS, any of those movies? Mm-hmm. It reminded me of that cheap, low-budget stuff, but super simple and effective.
Yeah.
All he did was use stock stuff to convey such a creepy message.
Yeah. There's something in the light of the moon, and it's fucking trying to make you join the
It came in just through a reflection in the mirror. The mirror let it in. And it's just like... What the fuck is in the moon?
This is Cthulhu beyond the darkest reaches of spaceship.
It's like Cthulhu meets Bird Box.
Bird Box.
Yeah. Like when it kept saying, look up at the sky. Wait, don't look up. Don't look. Yeah. I was like, this is just like Bird Box.
Yeah. The authority has failed. You can't trust your senses. And the news is giving you conflict. You don't know who to believe. It's all there. And again, it's over in 2 minutes and 15 seconds, and that's it. And simple. Not a lot to say about it, except that it does something so simple with so little tools in the tool chest and pulls it off perfectly.
I'm a terrible person, and I can only imagine.
I can agree.
I can only imagine taking this clip and putting it on the TV of someone who sleeps with TV on in the middle of the night, and just while they're asleep, abruptly changing it to this, and them not realizing that it's fake, and they think it's actually...
You're going to pull a damn not Invasion of the Body Snatchers. What's the one that was on the radio and some people took it seriously? Why the fuck am I blanking on it? It was It was about an alien attack. It was a radio program, but it was taken seriously as a fucking... Yeah, that. You're gonna pull one of those.
I know what you're talking about. I'm having a blank right now. Why can I not think of it?
This is embarrassing.
Yeah, this is very
For
embarrassing.
a horror show, like, we should do better. Anyway, you're going to do one of those.
Yeah, Orson Welles style.
Thank you, Orson Welles. Ugh.
Yeah, Orson Welles style.
Yeah.
Yeah, do that to somebody in their own home and watch what the fuck happens.
Watch them freak the fuck out.
Yeah.
On a night when the moon is full.
Yeah, especially.
Yeah. Because I'm a new moon, you're not going to get anything. But yeah,
that's the kind of that's the level of evil I would have done.
Yeah. But yeah, no voices. Chris Straub just doing it right. And as usual, the links to this movie and next month's movie, the IMDb pages for both will be in there. The links to the short will be in there. And also links to all of our social medias will be in the show notes. So don't sleep on the show notes, folks. A lot of good info in there. A lot of good info in there. And Goreship, my friend, I think that about wraps it up for another episode of Judgmental Horror Junkies.
I do believe so. Thank you all for listening to our wrestling rant. And,
yes.
This
one actually clocked in at like almost 2 hours and 20 minutes, even though we did a shorter movie and a really short.
Yeah.
But that's because we had to do a little wrestle talk. Had to do a little wrestle talk at the beginning. Till then, we hope you all stay safe. And go watch a... Terry Funk and a Bray Wyatt match this month. Give some respect to the legends. And in 30 days, in the tall grass, we'll see you then.
Adios.